Get it? Billion Anti-Weaponization Fund and Princeton's Khalil Gibran Muhammad on the growing number of non-white students at U.S. colleges.
I'm Trenni Casey in for Margery Egan. Then in the second hour, it's former Education Secretary Paul Reville. We'll also have food policy analyst Corby Kummer on the collapse of clover. We're going to end the show with a boom, one that was felt across the greater Boston area after a meteorite exploded off the coast. Did you feel it? Call or text next on BPR.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Libby Casey. Iran's semi-official news agency is reporting that Tehran is suspending talks with the U.S. over Israel's operations in Lebanon and Gaza. Iran's Tasnim news agency, which is associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, said today that Tehran is suspending all communication through intermediaries with the U.S. There is no immediate confirmation from senior Iranian officials that messages, mostly relayed via Pakistan between the warring parties, were being suspended. Ukraine targeted oil and gas infrastructure in several regions of Russia over the weekend. The attacks are the latest in a growing campaign of Ukrainian strikes on Russia's energy industry that Kyiv calls long-range sanctions. From Moscow, NPR's Charles Maines reports.
Ukraine said its drone struck an oil refinery in the Russian city of Saratov, some 500 miles to the southeast of Moscow, with the local governor confirming damage to civilian infrastructure. Separately, authorities in Russia's southern Krasnodar region said a drone struck a large fuel depot, causing a massive fire. Months of Ukrainian attacks have degraded Russia's oil export capacity, by some estimates up to 40%.
That's NPR's Charles Maines. 3 Ebola vaccine candidates are being fast-tracked for development by the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, a global health organization. NPR's Jonathan Lambert reports.
The Ebola outbreak centered in the Democratic Republic of Congo is already one of the largest on record, with over 1,100 suspected cases. It's driven by a rarer species of Ebola, bundabujo, for which there are no approved vaccines or treatments. But there are several candidate vaccines, and 3 will receive millions of dollars to jumpstart development. One is a bundabujo version of the Ervbo vaccine, which was approved for a different Ebola strain. Another is being developed by the University of Oxford using a platform similar to the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. And the third is an mRNA vaccine from Moderna. It takes time for manufacturers to make enough product for clinical trials, so it'll likely be several months before any candidate reaches the outbreak. Jonathan Lambert, NPR News.
Congress returns to Washington this week after a Memorial Day break, but the problems they left behind haven't gotten any easier. NPR's Eric McDaniel has more.
In order to pass a party-line bill to fund immigration enforcement operations for the rest of Trump's term, the rules say Senate Republicans have to allow Democrats the chance to put amendments up for a vote. That's become a problem. Democrats are planning an amendment to ban President Trump's new fund of taxpayer dollars for those claiming to be victims of politically motivated prosecutions. And GOP leaders think the amendment has more than enough Republican support to pass. It's an awkward situation for the party in power and one that could provoke the ire of the president. Some hoped the president would walk away from what he describes as an anti-weaponization fund while lawmakers were back home meeting with constituents. That didn't happen. Eric McDaniel, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu kicks off the city's Pride Month festivities today with a flag raising and remarks at Boston City Hall. The event begins at 12:45 this afternoon. Worcester's Abbey House celebrated a milestone of 50 years of service to women and children in the region. The Worcester Guardian reports the shelter celebrated its anniversary this past Friday with stories of resilience, community support, and a renowned commitment to serving women and families facing homelessness. Abbey's House began in 1976 after Annette Rafferty answered an invitation from the Worcester Urban Ministry Commission to tackle homelessness in the community, specifically among women and children. As chair of the task force, Rafferty proposed a solution, and that was to open a new shelter to serve vulnerable populations. When the idea was voted down by the commission, Rafferty resigned from the task force and launched a grassroots effort to bring a shelter to the city. And now, 50 years later, Abbey's House remains an important resource for women and children, providing shelter, support, and community. In sports, the Red Sox off today. They open a series with the Orioles at friendly Fenway tomorrow, and then they are into the quarterfinals at the French Open. A lot of exciting tennis being played. A lot of the top seeds are out, and there's still some great tennis to be played. Sunny, low 60s this afternoon, clear mid-40s overnight, sunny mid-70s tomorrow, partly cloudy and near 80 on Wednesday. Yes, 53 in Boston right now, 58 Springfield. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, offering investors choices from self-directed investing to full-service wealth management all in one place. Committed to helping investors in any life stage with their investing goals. More at schwab.com.
You're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM. She is NBC 10 Boston, Sue O'Connell. In for Jim Browdy, I'm NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey. In for Margery Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Don't worry, Jim and Margery, they'll be back tomorrow live from the Boston Public Library with Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey from 11 to noon for Ask the Governor. Happy Monday, Sue.
Happy Monday to you as well, Trenni. So glad to bring our office chit-chat to the masses. Isn't this exciting?
I wonder if we should tell them what we talk about when we're at work. Maybe not.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Producer Jamie was like, do you guys work together? I'm like, Trenni's desk is right on the way to the cafeteria, to the food. So I talk to her every time. And I say things like, do you know where this candy? Is that free pizza? How long has it been there?
And I ask things to Sue, like, what's happening with this trial? And should I be worried that the Republic is going to fall? Could you tell me if I should emigrate to Canada? What should I do?
Yeah, fun things like that. So anyway, glad to be doing this for the first time, certainly not the last. And we're going to open the show today and talk about America's 250th birthday coming up. Who would have thunk it? Surprising that it's actually happening. Maybe, maybe not. It's only 30 days away. There's a kickoff here in Boston, obviously, around the country, Washington, D.C., where that Great American State Fair was supposed to be a nonpartisan concert and celebration. We were supposed to hear from artists like Martina McBride and Morris Day and The Time, the Commodores, and Poison's Bret Michaels, and they have all dropped out. Over the weekend, President Trump took to his Truth Social platform to declare that the event should be canceled. This is his event, by the way, and replaced with a MAGA rally, saying instead of having overpriced singers who nobody wants to hear, whose music is boring, and yet who do nothing but complain. Yeah, he booked them. So the phone and text lines are open this morning at 877-301-8970. More broadly, is America's coming semi-quincentennial celebration getting you excited, or is it like everything else that President Trump touches and trumps up? Is the magic gone? Or does the whole thing just feel icky because of him, or just because you don't like it? Is it all MAGA-coded drag being the operative word? Or are you actually excited to celebrate no matter what, and you're not going to let this special day be ruined by politics? 877-301-8970. You can call or text America 250 NU. Is it a celebration for all, or is it being co-opted? Trenni, what are your feelings?
Okay, so I'm sort of torn on this. On the one hand, I love history.
Yes.
My husband and I live in the North End, and I think it's so cool to every once in a while, walk through the neighborhood and see something that you've never noticed before, a plaque on a building, a group walking through, and you overhear a Freedom Trail tour, and you're like, wow, I didn't know that. That's such a cool little nugget about the birthplace of America in Boston. I love all the guys who walk around, and women, in their revolutionary garb and do the tours.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. I went last year for the midnight ride of Paul Reville. It was a beautiful night. It was right around the corner from where I live. So I went and watched them reenact the ride. So you had to get up
and leave the house and go 2 blocks.
I had to get up out of the house and go around the corner where I saw them light the lantern, right. And then they rode the horses, and then they rode on the Charles. And I was like, this is awesome. And then I also said to my husband, we cannot be here 4th of July weekend. Right. Under no circumstances can we be here.
But is that just because of the hubbub? Because, I live in Boston as well. I enjoy hearing about things that are happening near me. Like,
So you're a
I have
typical Bostonian. You
never
like
been-
hearing about it, but you don't want to actually go.
Never been to the 4th of July on the Esplanade with the fireworks. Watch it every year. I could see the fireworks from my house, from the park right behind my house. I love being the host to it, and I love it all, but I don't necessarily always participate in it. And as far as the Trumpiness of all of this,
That's where it gets icky.
I'm not going to let anyone take away celebrating. I'm like ridiculously patriotic. When I was a little kid, with my across the street neighbor Nicholas Giacobbe, who went on to work for the State Department, we would put a flag up in my yard, in his yard, the American flag, every day. And when we took it down, we would do the folding ceremony every single time, right? Wow. So that's the kind of kid that I was with Nicholas, right? And so I'm not going to let anything ruin me celebrating our nation's 250th birthday.
So I am still a proud American. I think there are great things about this country. It's the stuff that's happening in Washington that bothers me, right? It's not the stuff that we're going to do in Boston. It's not the stuff that it sounds like I might get to go to New Hampshire to my in-laws' place for the holiday, which is going to be lovely, where we can grill out and maybe if the town hasn't canceled fireworks, see some fireworks. Like that part of it, I think is awesome. I would want nothing. Like I won't watch a lot of times on 4th of July. I actually like to come home and watch the fireworks on NBC, and then you've got like they take the musical acts from all over the country. That I have like no interest in this year because it just feels icky because everything he touches turned to poo.
All right, let's take some phone calls. Folks are calling in, and you can join the conversation too by calling or texting 877-301-8970. Let's go to Mary in Rentham. Hey, Mary, how are you?
Hey, I'm sitting on the deck looking at my beautiful hummingbirds and squirrels, and I'm saying to myself, why in God's green earth are we still giving oxygen to this man? We should be completely ignoring him just the way when they had the election and Biden was elected, do you remember none of the news outlets were using the name Donald Trump anymore? We should ignore this guy. He hates that more than anything. But even negative attention, he'll lap it up. So let's just ignore the whole thing and just go to our cookouts and have fun and get sick from potato salad that's been sitting out in the sun too long.
So you're saying just ignore whatever's happening in Washington, D.C. for the 250th stuff and just concentrate, as it sounds like Trenni's going to do, with what's near and dear to you. Is that what your advice is, Mary?
I'm going to say one thing, and I have become a meme on your show. Make it stop.
That's it.
I don't disagree.
Yep.
An anonymous texter might have the best idea for us.
Happy 4th.
An anonymous texter writes in, my family and I are celebrating the 250th in a perfect location, France.
There you go. You know what? If it weren't for
Can I
us,
join your
there'd
family
be no
vacation?
democracy
Yeah,
right now in
exactly.
France. So they
Lafayette.
should be. Don't let them be rude to you. Another anonymous texter says, I feel like America 250 is a funeral. I'm sad and grieving for what America was and what it is now. I'm sad for what could have been and for how this milestone was corrupted. Yeah, I imagine if you actually could do that exercise where you take the founding fathers and mothers and all, bring them just forward, say, hey, great, look, you won the revolution, you did the Constitution, this is great.
This is what happened. What do you think?
Washington is president. Here's where we are. I think they would go back and say, maybe we should sew up some of those loopholes. Maybe we should give the Supreme Court an army. Maybe we should do that.
Or maybe we shouldn't have we have limited terms, or I don't know. I'm sure they would think of something that might have saved us from this.
Let's go to Susan in Merrimack. Susan, welcome to Trenni and Sue on Boston Public Radio, in for Jim and Margery.
Good morning, ladies. I just wanted to say that I'm old enough, and I hail from the Washington, D.C. area, that at midnight on July 4th, 1976, I was standing on the steps of the Capitol and just feeling so proud and so patriotic and so happy, and it's just feeling so lucky to be an American. And it's really sad how that whole outlook has been somewhat replaced by existential dread these days, and I'm fighting to try and reclaim some of it. I want to reclaim the American flag. I want to maintain my optimism, but it's hard.
So, Susan, I too am of that age. I was in Washington in 1976, just before the 4th of July, and crying the whole time when I saw the Lincoln Memorial in 8th grade. I cried. You can imagine how popular I was. I cried seeing the Lincoln Memorial.
Well, it also happened while you were folding the flag.
Yeah, folding the flag. But at the same time, there was so much we didn't know about what rights we didn't have. Like could women get a credit card at that point? There was no same-sex marriage. There certainly was an erasure of all sorts of people from history. We just didn't talk about it because we didn't know about it. We weren't that far away from the Jim Crow laws. So there was an innocence that we had because we didn't know or weren't old enough to pay attention, or people were suppressing it. I sort of feel like now we know, like this is the America that we have built and voted for, but still at 250, with a democracy that's still alive, I'm not going to let anybody rain on my parade.
Well, to that point, another anonymous texter wrote in and said, there's nothing to celebrate this year, but everything to fight for. And maybe that's a way to look at it. In your own celebrations, remember the grand ideas about this nation and realize that we fought to create this nation and you have to fight to keep it.
Let's talk to Chuck in Brighton. Chuck, welcome to BPR. You're on with Trenni and Sue.
Hi, so good to talk to you guys. The whole the quote-unquote celebration really, really makes me cringe. And I think that the epitome of cringe is what's happening with this UFC fight on the White House lawn. And it's interesting because the White House releases this photo. It's like a close-up of the quote-unquote arena being built. And now there's another photo that's circulating around the internet that's a pulled back shot that also includes the demolished East Wing. And it's just the perfect metaphor of what's going on. And, also just the idiocy of holding a championship fight outside in June in Washington, D.C. It's insane. Just physically, it's insane. None of it makes any sense, and it all makes me cringe.
Chuck, what are you going to do on 4th of July instead? What are you going to do?
It's funny you had the texters say they were going to be in Paris. I'm going to be in Canada.
Great.
I'm going to be celebrating Canada Day on July 1st, and then from afar celebrating the Independence Day.
So, Chuck, I was recently in Canada. Don't try and order any American alcohol at the bar, okay? Just an FYI.
No.
It's funny.
No,
I'm not as crazed about the event on the lawn of the White House as a singular thing, but as part of everything is what my challenge is around it. Like, if that were like hey, we're doing something for everyone, and
kind of like a carnival.
Well,
this is sort of a circus sideshow, the whole thing.
But people enjoy it. UFC fighting is a big deal. It's great if it were a boxing match or if it was women's volleyball.
And then maybe on one of the other parts of DC, you have like a beautiful symphony play.
Exactly.
You have something for everyone.
But that's not what's happening, and that's the challenge. And the other part here, which, if you dig deeper into this, like so many things that the Trump organization, the Trump companies have done, there are so many 250 organizations that Trump is organizing and has private donations for, that some of these artists signed up for this and did not know what they were signing up for, and honestly didn't know who was organizing it. And there's some concern about what corporations are making donations to some of these 250 America organizations and what they expect to get from it, because Trump is so cheap and easy. You just make a $5 million donation from a cigarette company, and next thing you know, they're basically putting jewels in kids' welcome back backpacks and elementary school. So God knows what we're giving away here for the 250th.
Well, to that point about corporations, though, there was a report that some corporations did give money to the America 250, which is different than the Freedom 250.
Exactly.
And so then they were asked for additional monies, and they were like, wait, hold on a second. So, I mean, everyone seems to be getting fleeced here.
Yeah.
That there's not this
Shocking.
distinction between Freedom 250 and America 250, which is a true nationwide celebration.
So it's like fraud. It's like filling out a check and saying you're paying someone and not the other, and then inflating an application for a loan, that kind of fraud. Amazing. All right, let's go to Lori in Peabody. Lori, welcome to BPR. How are you?
Hi, good. Well, similar to a couple of other callers, I'm 70. So I remember the bicentennial very well, and it was post Vietnam and Watergate, there was a lot of cynicism in the world, and in the country. Ford was president. I was a Democrat, young Democrat. But I'll tell you what, it was great. I remember the Clipper ships coming through. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about the parties at all. We celebrated the history. I love the history. Now, it's so disappointing. First of all, I read that Congress had a commission 10 years ago that was supposed to start working on this, a bipartisan group, or not even a political, to do it, to put different events together.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, as you mentioned, there's these bogus Trump organizations that they've taken over, and it's going to be all about him. And I know that, so I dread it, and it's going to be a cheap clown show, just like he tried to put on that big military parade when he first got in. He won't really spend money on things, and so it's terrible. It ends up just being a mess. And so I'll focus on maybe what they do here in Massachusetts, because Boston obviously was a part of the, our declaration and all of that. But it's sad. It's sad that we can't celebrate this, or I feel like I can't, because it's going to be all about the MAGA, we own the flag now, and it's not a unifying thing. And it feels like they slapped it together, like all of a sudden it's in a month. And what's even planned? Are there going to be the big ships in New York Harbor? No, you've heard nothing.
Lori, what's amazing to me, and those are all very excellent points, is that this should be a layup for Trump, right? He is a showman. Right? He definitely knows what people want, and he knows how to put on a great show, right? And the fact that this is such a mess, and I think part of it is because there's no one to say no to him, and he's not listening to anyone say no to him. But again, we have this historic birthday coming up. The reflecting pool is no longer going to reflect. He had an opportunity to fix it. There are problems with the reflecting pool. Didn't fix it, right? It's not going to reflect. We've got the ballroom's not done. That's a mess. It's like your neighbor moved in next door to you, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to do all these great things for the neighborhood." And next thing you know, you're like calling, the inspectional services on them.
I mean, do you really think this party wants to reflect on anything, even a pool? So, I mean, is anyone surprised by this?
Good point. All right, let's see. We've got Heather in Medford texted us. The Republicans don't want us focusing and celebrating our democracy and the act of overthrowing tyrants. There's definitely a friction there, between the two of what we're doing and what we're celebrating.
Well, I mean, I do feel like our last caller made a point that it feels like the right has co-opted patriotism, but I do wonder, is this an opportunity for the left to sort of reclaim that? For states like Massachusetts, California, New York, Vermont, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan to put on these grand displays of patriotism, and maybe rather than all of us feeling disgusted by it, we all buy American flag stuff. Although it's probably really affected by tariffs and are probably more expensive. So maybe you just dig something out of your closet and take it back as saying to another texter's point of what we're going to fight for, that this is a country that's worth fighting for. Maybe we're just looking at it from a negative perspective when we should look at it as an opportunity.
I agree. And listen, there's always been a conflict on the 4th of July. Reading Frederick Douglass's letter to America, remarking, as I was, talking earlier with Susan, we have never really lived up to the ideals of what we hoped. And the reasons for our revolution weren't always, beyond let's get the land and make sure we can have enslaved people on it before the Europeans get it. But at the same time, the ideals are what we try and celebrate. You're listening to BPR with Trenni and Sue. Let's talk to David in Virginia. Hey, David, welcome. Another Commonwealth.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, from Virginia, but I also live part-time up in Plum Island, so I'm part of your guys' territory as well. I think one thing that really bothers me is that too often people conflate, and this was mentioned just a minute ago, conflate America 250 with Freedom 250. Freedom 250 is the Trump organization stuff. It's everything that they're doing politically motivated. America 250, from what I understand, has a lot of really good and interesting celebratory events taking place. And unfortunately, what Trump manages to do is to co-opt things that are really good and then turn them around for his advantage. So in some fashion, we have to get people to understand that there are two separate things going on. That's what the musicians who signed up for didn't understand at first. When they learned it, they dropped out of it, the Freedom 250 thing. And make sure that people understand that when you do want to do a celebration, it's perfectly fine. And if you criticize what's going on the Freedom 250, you're not being unpatriotic, which is what I think Trump would like people to think.
That's a good distinction, David, and that's exactly the kind of chaos the Trump administration tends to mix up with. There's, as an earlier caller said, there have been plans for this for a very long time, and those plans are going off, and that's separate from whatever will or will not happen on the White House property. David, thanks for calling, and we'll see you soon up here in the other Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Another anonymous texter takes a different route, does not see it as a day of celebration, but July 4th is a day of mourning. There's nothing you can do to celebrate. America is now an authoritarian fascist state. Democracy has been destroyed. I will be ignoring any celebration and reading Frederick Douglass's speech, "What to the Negro is the 4th of July." Until America actually lives up to anything like a moral compass, I will mourn for the failed American democracy.
Okay, then.
It's understandable.
I understand the feeling, but got to take action. I'm Irish. We don't mourn and grieve very long unless we write a poem about it. And then we monetize it, and then we say, off you go.
Off you go. Praise another Guinness.
Let's talk to Joanna in Fairhaven. Joanna, welcome to Boston Public Radio with Trenni and Sue.
Well, good morning. I have a couple of things, and one is that if you want to enjoy celebrating patriotism, you should go to your local town. And in my town, in Fairhaven, we have a homespun parade and a celebration, a ceremony down at the flagpole at the park, and they read the Declaration of Independence, and everyone sings "God Bless America," and it's just that's a heartfelt celebration, and not these big spectacles that they're holding in Washington. And one thing about that, the wrestling match, or whatever it's called, they have imposed a weight limit for the
soldiers,
service people who are, that they have to fit a certain, image of what should appear on television, and they can't have a stomach.
Yeah, they can't get enough folks to go, so they're telling the military service members to go. I think if I read last, they have to pay their own way to get there, and they have to be what used to be considered TV ready and look good and not be over a certain weight in order to attend, to make the audience look good. See, not only that, they're ruining beauty. Trenni.
We've sort of done that on our own. That is a topic for another day.
Thanks for your call.
Our unrealistic beauty standards, particularly for women, but it is not at all surprising that this administration would put those kind of restrictions.
See, equality is coming that way. So another thing folks could do is they could check to make sure they're registered to vote, and also make sure they get someone else to vote. That's something they could do on the 4th of July instead of watching the UFC fight.
Could also participate in your local elections, which often have a bigger impact than national elections.
And don't always happen in November, so you can
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We loved your calls and your texts. Thank you for them. Coming up after this quick break, we have retired federal judge Nancy Gertner for another edition of On the Docket. I'm Trenni Casey, in for Margery Egan. She is Sue O'Connell, in for Jim Browdy. And you are listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Less noise, more news. GBH News 89.7, gbhnews.org, and streaming on the GBH app. Trusted local news.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. RWJF is a national philanthropy working toward a future where health is no longer a privilege but a right. Learn more at rwjf.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Cambridge Trust, a division of Eastern Bank, offering business and personal wealth management and private banking services, investing more than $240 million in local communities since 1994. More at cambridgetrust.com.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, financial journalist Andrew Ross Sorkin, and former NASA head Charles Bolden. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. I'm NBC 10 Boston Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy, and she is NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey in for Margery Egan, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will be back tomorrow live from the Boston Public Library with Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey from 11 to noon for Ask the Governor. Now, for another edition of On the Docket, we are joined on Zoom by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Hello, Judge Gertner. Happy June 1st.
There you go. Well, that concludes my presentation.
Good job.
Thank you so much for joining us, Judge Gertner. Now, could you please explain to us, we're going to start with these weaponization funds coming off a talk about the America's 250th, $1.776 billion. Can you just explain to us the fund itself and why 35 former judges, yourself included, have deemed it potentially fraudulent?
So think about it this way. Donald Trump could not have called up the head of the IRS and say, hey, give me 1.8 billion. I want to use it for whatever I want to use it for. It had to be in the context of a claim, a legitimate beef that someone had with the IRS, and therefore deserved the money. It was a legitimate legal claim. What he believed was that the only way to make his demand legitimate was to go through the courts. So he went and he filed Trump versus IRS, seeking, because of claiming that the disclosure of his tax returns had harmed him. He asked then for $10 billion. And then when the judge began to smell something was wrong here, the judge in Florida, she asked for people who are not Trumpers, who were outside the government, to file amicus briefs to determine if this was a collusive suit. What a collusive suit is if the plaintiff and the defendant are both the same. And Trump, who typically says the quiet part out loud, literally said, am I going to negotiate with myself? So there were about to be briefs that would have blown this out of the water, that would have shown that this was not a real lawsuit, that this was a phony lawsuit as between two parties that was essentially the same. Before those briefs could be heard by the judge, Trump settled the case. And took the case away from the court, or so he thought. The judge had to dismiss the case, or believed she had to dismiss the case, because if the parties bringing the case, both sides say there's no case here, we wish to settle, then the case is arguably over. That's what they did, and they were about to proceed to collect on roughly 1.8 billion. At that point, I and 34 other retired judges filed a motion to reopen the case on the grounds that this was a fraudulent and collusive lawsuit, which fraud on the court, essentially, where two parties that were really one tried to get money, tried to agree to something which didn't make any sense at all, and which was something they didn't have a right to agree to. We filed that last week, claiming that this was a fraud on the court. Identifying the fact that, that essentially Trump and the IRS were one, and identifying his comments that made it clear that that was true. And then in addition, there had been actually numbers of other lawsuits in which the IRS, lawsuits involving disclosure of tax returns, and the IRS had fought them in any other case, fought them because they were brought too late, fought them because there was no reason for that measure of damages, no indication that Trump or other people were actually harmed by this. So they fought them. And in this case, of course, the IRS just rolled over. The judge is seeking additional briefs on whether to reopen the case. And that's where things are. But I mean, this is really a ruse. This is really an end run around the law, and using essentially the court as a fig leaf to deal with their demand on, his demand on the Treasury, on our money. So that's why 35 judges in a matter of days agreed to sign on to this brief.
Judge Gertner, there is something called the Judgment Fund that does exist for good at times. But what struck me about this panel in particular is it's going to be 5 appointees that are Trump appointed. And of course, the recipients and the people who are most likely to apply to get any sort of judgment here are those who participated in the January 6th uprisings. Like, for those who don't know, what is the Judgment Fund usually used for, and how is it decided who it's distributed to? And is there any chance that this money could go to anyone who's actually deserving of it?
Well, let me say, it was not only the fund, the $1.8 billion, it was also, as part of the settlement, out of the blue, not mentioned in the case, and certainly nothing before the judge, was the fact that it was going to keep the IRS from going against Trump or any of his family members for existing claims or claims in the future. I mean, it essentially was pardoning any tax issues, not just for Trump in the past, but going forward. I mean, it was extraordinarily broad. Usually the claims fund is when there are legitimate legal questions about what the IRS did or didn't do, claims that are about to get into court where they would have been legitimately litigated. And this is a fund that would enable you to make a claim on that, or if a case was settled in court, you could make a claim on it. Again, the IRS would determine what's a legitimate claim, but the notion of setting aside money for legal claims against the IRS makes perfect sense. The IRS, however, can usually be counted on to fight them, or to narrow them, or to litigate them, or to say, is this legitimate? Of course, when the claim is brought by the President of the United States, who's your boss, none of that happens. So the idea of a claim fund is not a bad, in fact, a good idea, because it enables sort of appropriated funds set aside to resolve claims against the IRS. But in this situation, it was clearly distorted and abused.
When you're saying all of that, and as I was reading all these articles, what stuck out to me was that the courts are often the last line of defense. But you talk about, at the end of the day, if you're a Trump-appointed judge, he is your boss. He has so much influence over you, like the IRS does. Like, how can we be confident that the judicial system will continue to be our last line of defense against this sort of fraudulent behavior?
Well, first of all, Trump is not the boss of the judges. The system is set up so judges are independent, and what's the measure of independence is they cannot be fired by Trump. They cannot be, in order to get rid of a judge, the judge has to be impeached, which is something that the Senate has to do.
But they can be influenced by him, correct? And make decisions and render judgments that are in his favor to continue to curry favor with him for political power.
But it's true that can happen, and surely happened with some of the Trump judges, that it's not just currying favor with him, it's sort of looking to go up the line to a Court of Appeals position, or maybe even the Supreme Court. But it can't be understated, the protections for the independence of the bench, of the judiciary, even Trump judges. I mean, it comes from, he can't be fired. You have the position for life. Your salary is protected. Sure, there can be judges who want to sort of go up the line and get other appointments, but that's not the usual one. In fact, the best measure of how the courts have held is the record of litigation since Trump was inaugurated. There have been over 700 lawsuits brought around the country. And something like, I don't have the figures in front of me, but like 70% of the cases have been resolved against the government, even with judges appointed by Trump. So the answer is that the independent judiciary is holding. There's no question about that. And then the courts of appeals likewise have been considering these cases, and for the most part, they've ruled against the president. The Supreme Court is a different matter. But the Supreme Court can't get 700 cases. The Supreme Court only gets a small portion of those cases. So one has to say, and it's a great relief that the courts have held here, no matter who appointed them.
We're speaking with retired Judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner, the other thing about where we're at with start to celebrate our 250th anniversary of our nation here. Exactly how much power the judicial arm of our government has. In the past, if a president or an administration sued and they lost, they might refile, right? But they would comply with what the judges in the ruling was. And while a lot of folks might fight back and go, yeah, well, Biden, he didn't believe in the loan, erasure for student loans, but he refiled in a different way and fought the argument, as we have been doing since I think we could write on cave walls with each other, trying to renegotiate. But what President Trump does, we see that he's the Kennedy Center he's been ordered that he can't just put his name up on it, but his next thing that he does is he attacks the judge over the weekend, right? Writes, because a highly conflicted, crooked federal judge said I should not be allowed to spend my time and money in order to make the center great again. These personal attacks, they take a toll. They're not good for America. They're not good for judges and their safety. I mean, can we get back from this, and can the courts get the power that I feel like they had prior to the president ignoring rulings?
Well, I mean, I think the record is mixed. Certainly on immigration rulings, the judges have seen that the immigration service is essentially ignoring rulings and deporting people under circumstances when they shouldn't be deported, and then resisting getting them back. So there's no question with respect to that there's been a disobedience, ignoring the law. As a general matter, though, I don't think that that's been the case. I mean, there has been funding pauses that Trump initiated where the courts have restored them and the funds have come back. There have been, I think it's a mixed record. With respect to the slush fund, by the way, I think a combination of the judge's ruling and the political opposition in Congress is going to put an end to that. I would predict that he gives that up. And the Kennedy Center issue is a really open and shut case, which is Congress set up the Kennedy Center as a memorial to a slain president. And he can't mess around with that. And he's going to have no choice but to comply, right? I mean, there's not going to be any way that he can get out of it. The attacks on the judges, that goes back to the question about the independence of the judiciary. It is remarkable that even in the face of really scurrilous attacks against judges, judges have persisted, understanding that by ruling against the president, they would basically get his ire. And judge after judge have ruled against him again, no matter who appointed him, no matter what the circumstances. I have no doubt that his comments, the comments of J.D. Vance, the comments of others, have led to an increased attacks on judges from one end of the country to the other. Not physical attacks yet, although there are episodes of doxing and there are episodes of really very serious threats. So certainly this language that Sue, you cited, leads to a situation where people feel empowered to attack judges. Threat levels, the FBI reports, are higher than they have ever been. So that is a problem. But again, getting back to the first question, the courts have held. The courts have absolutely held. Judges have taken whatever risks there are to do, in my view, the right thing.
We only have a couple of minutes left, Judge Gertner. I want to remind our audience that each state has its own constitution and is in charge of their elections and districting, and a federal incursion into many of these rules and regulations seems to be happening. And certainly we're in a very important midterm election, as we always say, but midterms are happening right now. There's a midterm coming up in Maine next week. The Supreme Court's involved in some of this. Do you think the courts are going to be able to hold that firewall between the states and the federal government when it comes to election execution, running the elections and redrawing the districts and all of that?
Well, I mean, it's a multi-front challenge. So with respect to the SAVE Act, that hasn't made it through Congress. This would require people to show documents proving their citizenship before they can register to vote. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't find my birth certificate if my life depended on it. Mm-hmm. And women whose names have changed will not be able to need to justify that they were that person born in the United States. Birth certificates actually were often rare in Black hospitals in the South. So this is essentially a rule that, first of all, deals with a problem that doesn't exist, which is non-citizens voting in elections, and winds up dissuading more people to vote than should be. The redistricting issue is a mess, and there's no question about it. The Supreme Court will be dealing with the Alabama case in which the claim is that the redistricting was done for the purposes of basically squashing Black representation. That'll be a question. The Supreme Court has now said that the only voting challenges to redistricting that will succeed are those in which you can prove intentional discrimination, which is extraordinarily difficult to prove. That, 50 years ago, not so much, but today people are smarter in covering up what their motives are. So yes, the Supreme Court has that case. The Supreme Court has a challenge to mail-in voting. And who knows where that will be. So the answer is that the Supreme Court, I think, has made voting more difficult, particularly for people of color. But if there is a blue wave, who cares?
All right, Nancy Gertner, thank you very much.
Just blue wave, as Sue said earlier, register to vote if you are not happy about America's 250th. Right? We have been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, thank you very much. Coming up after a quick break, Princeton University professor Khalil Gibran Muhammad. I'm Trenni Casey, in for Margery Egan. She is Sue O'Connell. She's in for Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Ethan Hawke. He has spent decades shaping contemporary film, starring in Hollywood classics, redefining independent cinema, and directing projects praised for their insight and originality. He joins us on The Culture Show to talk about the roles that marked him, the stories that drive him, and his enduring creative partnerships. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about Safety Insurance. Safety Insurance will help you manage life's storms. And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Edmonia Lewis, Said in Stone, a retrospective of the 19th century Black woman sculptor. More at PEM.org.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. I'm Sue O'Connell and Trenni Casey. We are in for Jim and Margery Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Don't worry, Jim and Margery, they'll be back tomorrow live from the Boston Public Library, and Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey will be with them from 11 to noon. And we are joined right now on Zoom by Khalil Gibran Muhammad, a professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton University, where he directs the Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability Project. He is also the non-resident senior fellow at the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation at Harvard. Khalil, good to see you again. Happy June.
Hi, Sue. Good to see you. And hi, it's Trenni.
Trenni, yes. Hi, nice to meet you virtually, nice how we used to do it back in the early 2020s. Khalil, this is an interesting article from Chronicle. Non-white students now make up the largest share of American universities' enrollment. On the surface, that seems like a tremendous milestone to reach. So where have we seen the biggest gains, but where do we still have some room to maybe do a better job?
Sure. So the Chronicle has been one of the most important sources for demographic analysis of who goes to what colleges and in what numbers. So they are announcing for the first time since they've been tracking that looking at something shy of 4,000 colleges and universities, the non-white population has now tipped to 50.3% of enrollment of nearly 9 million students as compared to 49.7% for white students. What's interesting is there's a lot of variation across the types of institutions. And so the greatest number of non-white students are attending associate colleges, meaning 2-year or what we often colloquially call community colleges at almost 60%. And then as you get to a traditional bachelor's 4-year school, it's down to about 42%. So we've heard this news over the past several months that one of the ways in which the Supreme Court decision in 2023 may be having an effect on a shuffle in who goes where, who applies where, is that an uptick in Black and other students of color attending associate colleges to some degree in record numbers as compared to more selective colleges, whether they're 4-year privates or 4-year elites.
And these numbers,
I'm sorry,
of course,
4-year publics. Yes.
These numbers are the most current numbers. They're from 2024, of course, before a lot of the chaos continued on the campuses. So I'm also looking at the economics part of this. My daughter's a proud community college graduate, and a number of the students she went to were already working or went with already working, went out and got jobs, good paying jobs. Some of them went to the community college for free, had already earned college credit, at their high schools. I'm wondering if this is also a reflection somewhat of the economics of getting a 4-year degree. That, that argument, I think last time we were on, we talked about it, that it's not for everyone, and maybe some people are seeing the gift of it more than others, and it happens to be non-white students.
I think that's true. I mean, listen, Obama during his presidency made a big deal about encouraging universal college attendance as a gateway to higher skills to compete in a global marketplace. So we've been seeing a trend towards increased enrollment at the associate level over the past several years, a couple decades now. And we only expect this trend to increase with respect to the affordability crisis in higher education more generally. That we are seeing that increase in overall enrollment run alongside increasing diversity or non-white enrollment suggests to some degree the broader shifts that are happening in our society. There's a kind of demographic destiny for this country that it will be a majority or minority nation. So in many ways, none of this is a surprise.
This next story particularly interests me because over the weekend, we have been entertaining some friends who are up from Florida. They have two daughters who go to the University of Florida. They are not your typical. They are not the typical Floridians. They, East Coast born and bred, and then moved down there at one point, and then had their 2 children. Here's the great part about Florida schools. You set your tuition. We're just talking about an affordability crisis. You set your tuition when the kids are born. You can pay into something. Their girls don't have to pay college tuition and then got scholarships to supplement. Here's the downside. The University of Florida has systematically erased 500 quote unquote woke classes that deal with globalization, women's issues, gender issues, and replaced it with what they deem to be more acceptable curriculum for their students. They want a more diversity of thought, yet they're taking away the diversity of thought. What is the danger in this at colleges? And we're seeing it not just in Florida, we're also seeing it in other, primarily, I think, like southern, larger, bigger state schools, like also in Texas.
Well, the danger is exactly the debate we've been having now, particularly at the elites, about the Trump administration's purging of all things DEI, including putting extreme pressure on university administrators to either fire, demote, or cancel classes. You might recall, given the increased news media around this, that Columbia and Harvard were basically told to allow the federal government to use a compliance mechanism to audit not only what classes were taught, but who got fired and what students were admitted. What I've been saying on this show and elsewhere is that essentially the horse was out of the barn at the state level, particularly in places like Florida and Texas. We're seeing similar trends in Alabama, as well as even Ohio. So This is now what we would expect to see given Ron DeSantis's a sort of innovative approach to higher education going back to 2020 and 2021. We are seeing the implementation, not just of the passage of the Stop Woke Act and other versions of bills to censor class content against woke indoctrination, but now the full court implementation of these policies. What we have here in the case of the University of Florida is just a complete reverse mirror image. They have established a new center called the Hamilton Center, which is promoting Western civilization. According to reporting by the Washington Post, 83% of the authors that are offered in this new curriculum are white guys. In one class in particular, out of 13 required readings, 12 are by white guys. This is Western civilization on steroids. And the great irony here, I mean, this is the tremendous irony in this moment. This is the college experience that I had. If I wanted to get a non-Western version of world history, I had to seek out a small number of classes at the University of Pennsylvania where I attended. This has been the nature of higher education for 400 years since Harvard was founded. It is only in the last decade that we've seen a greater increase of course offerings that would, as in the case of the University of Florida, offer a sociology curriculum on globalization, as if the world centers around Europe, as if that's the only thing that matters. So it is censorship. It is indoctrination of a different kind. It is in many ways much worse than what these critics claimed woke education was in the first place.
Well, and on top of that, like, even if you want to say, just for, devil's advocate, okay, some of these classes maybe we didn't need. Maybe they shouldn't be on the list.
Like Taylor Swift's,
whatever.
Impact on culture.
I'll give you a couple of layups, whatever you want. At the same time, they're targeting the type of courses that one would think our adults would need for critical thinking skills, right? So it's sociology courses and philosophy courses and courses that are supposed to have a number of different views within them to help them and help us be better critical thinkers as adults, and not just take, to your point, what we're feeding them as how it is. They're supposed to be questioning. They're supposed to be thinking. They're supposed to be challenging on all ends. And so, in a way, they're dumbing down the college experience. Am I just overreacting?
No, Sue, but actually you have it backwards. In their vision, they do not want students to be questioning. Right. They do not want students to have critical, independent thinking skills. If we remind ourselves that we have an authoritarian government and fascist wannabes running state legislative bodies all over the country who are hostile and skeptical of democracy itself and see various ways of understanding the world as a threat to their iron fist control over our minds and the society we live in, this all makes perfect sense. Let me remind you that for every criticism of so-called woke indoctrination, there is no equivalent in the past that required people to take these classes on African American studies or women's and gender studies. These classes overwhelmingly are electives. What is happening now is that they are removing even the possibility that you could take such a class. That is the difference in the power differential between what they have in mind and what they criticize to justify what they're doing.
Well, what's interesting to me is it's not just, it's not just a narrow lane where it only affects students and classes. The Harvard Crimson just published a report about $10 million being dedicated to find, and the term they use is viewpoint diversity. That's sort of their catchphrase of trying to hire professors with different viewpoints from what they normally skew, which sounds to me like they're trying to get more right-leaning professors when they feel like they have too many left-leaning professors. And on the surface, it sounds almost nefarious, but I do wonder, is there a place to rethink maybe the types of having those different schools of thought, or is this another way of just quietly indoctrinating students to a different way of thinking than they typically were at a university?
Well, the money that Harvard is investing in this viewpoint diversity initiative is much greater. It's $10 million per professor that they seek to hire, just for the record. Additionally, let me quote from one of the job announcements that the American politics or that the politics department or government department announced that is covered in the Crimson piece. It says the American politics wants, quote, particularly interested in scholars whose research and teaching significantly expands the traditional academic discourse about national and world affairs. Well, that's exactly what so-called DEI was attempting to do. The traditional academic discourse about national and world affairs was to expand how we understand non-Western traditions and people who have often been victims of colonialism. So what is this saying? Let's go back to what we've always done. I mean, it's insanity in terms of the cover of viewpoint diversity. Let me also point out that viewpoint diversity is not a standard for academic excellence. It is simply one of many ways in which one can think about the totality of a candidate, so that you would build viewpoint diversity as your primary focus rather than leading scientists to solve for cancer and Alzheimer's, leading humanists who are discovering new ways to write poetry or new histories to tell about parts of the world or peoples of the world that we know less about. I find it actually surprising that Harvard is participating in this, but so is the political pressure that the Trump administration has compelled it to do so.
It just takes my breath away on a regular basis. We're speaking with Khalil Gibran Muhammad. Let's stay with Harvard for a little bit, because I have to say, when all is said and done, I think if we go back and look at what happened to Harvard under the Trump administration, it's going to be a case study. It's going to be one of those Harvard Business School case studies. I'm going to be a good researcher and say I don't know what the result's going to be, but I do know it's going to be interesting. There were a number of legit accusations of Harvard being anti-Semitic. Students were unhappy and felt unsafe, especially during the Gaza protests. There are other students on campus who also feel unsafe, and they continue to feel unsafe. And Trump, of course, the Trump administration, has used Harvard as the centerpiece of their fighting college campus anti-Semitism, while at the same time behaving in a way that inviting people to the White House and having dinners with people and platforming people who couldn't be any more anti-Semitic. But
You digress.
I digress. We are seeing reports, New York Times report, that Jewish life is thriving on campus. At the same time, there's obviously a strike of some staffers who Mayor Michelle Wu will not give remarks at Harvard because of the strike. So what's your take on what's happening right now? And is it happening in a good way because of the Trump administration's intervention, or is it something that was bound to happen anyway because good people like to take action to rectify things?
Well, Sue, you're more generous than I would be, to be honest with you. At the height of the Gaza protests, I was still teaching at the university.
Mm-hmm.
I was teaching on October. I wasn't teaching on October 7th. It was a Saturday, but I taught immediately afterwards. I can tell you from firsthand experience that much of what was happening on that campus was a shocking realization that a number of students on that campus do not support Israel. And some of them don't support Israel's right to exist. Now, we live in a context where that makes you an anti-Semite, according to many people, the State Department currently, as well as a number of Jewish leaders and followers. It is also true that one of the lead organizers of the encampments on that campus was Jewish, along with several others who participated in those encampments. There is a civil war going on amongst Jews themselves with respect to Zionism and anti-Zionism. Unfortunately, the reporting that's happened about this change in the climate on the campus does not give, at least in the New York Times, not a single sentence for a student who participated in those encampments as a Jewish person or as a person who is Jewish who opposes Israel on the terms of its current expressions of Zionism. What you see playing out, in my opinion, is that Alan Garber and the administration for so long simply created a climate where there was a 4-alarm fire of anti-Semitism on campus, anti-Semitism everywhere, all at once, unmitigated. The problem is, if you stake your claim to that happening on your campus now for almost 2 years, you basically give the Trump administration carte blanche to come in and do what they have been doing, which is to say, under Title VI, you are disrespecting Jews. So here's what's happened. They realized that they have to actually change the narrative about what's happening on that campus. And now we have happy times for Jewish students. So to me, the politics of this are so complicated that the Harvard administration itself is complicit in creating the conditions for those lawsuits. And now we see they've shifted and students are going along with it.
We have to leave it
I was
there.
gonna say,
More to come.
We would talk to you for hours, the entire show, about this. Thank you so much. We have been speaking with Khalil Gibran Muhammad, professor of African American Studies and Public Affairs at Princeton, where he directs the Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability Project. He is also the non-resident senior fellow at the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation at Harvard. Khalil, thank you. We now say goodbye to those of you listening on NEPM, but make sure to tune into the fabulous 413 starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The show, though, here in Boston, it continues. Coming up after this quick break, former Education Secretary Paul Reville on why teachers unions want to stop AI chatbots in the classroom. I'm Trenni Casey, in for Margery Egan. She is Sue O'Connell, here for Jim Browdy, and you're listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
If you made a gift to GBH this year, thank you. Your support keeps this great reporting coming all summer long. So, if you can, please consider making an additional gift by the end of the month, online at gbhnews.org.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Rogers Fish Company, founded by Roger Berkowitz. Their signature double clam chowder is available for purchase at all Market Basket locations. More at rogersfishcompany.com. And Burton's Grill and Bar, offering a Bar Bites menu. Steak skewers, bourbon shrimp, bang bang broccoli, and more. Served weekdays from 3 to 6 at Burton's 8 locations in Greater Boston. Menu at burtonsgrill.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Welcome back to Hour 2 of BPR on 89.7 GBH. She is NB... No, that's me. Oh, you're supposed to read this.
I was like, that's all right. I'll just let Sue keep
right.
going.
You're Margery today.
I'm Margery
all right,
today.
You take over. My bad. See, I'm acting like Jim.
Yeah, you're interrupting me.
Go
Perfect.
ahead.
We are playing
All right.
our perfect
Go ahead.
roles
Go
tonight.
ahead.
Today. That was Sue O'Connell. She's in for Jim Browdy. I am NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey. I'm in for Margery Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will be back tomorrow live from the Boston Public Library. They'll have Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey from 11 to noon for Ask the Governor. I think you're Sue. Hello again,
yes,
Sue.
Look, I highlighted
AKA
it and everything,
Jim.
and I still botched it. Anyway, we're joined now in Studio 3 by Paul Reville. He is the former Secretary of Education in Massachusetts and a professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, where you also lead the Ed Redesign Lab. Welcome, Paul. Great to see you in person.
Glad to
Thanks
be
for
here
coming in.
and impersonating myself.
And you broke out the white pants because it's after Memorial Day. We appreciate that.
Unfortunately, you did not bring the after Memorial Day weather, but I hear it's coming. I hear it's coming.
We hope.
What else is coming, guys? AI. It's coming for
Heard
all
that.
of us.
Oh my God.
And there's like two schools of thought. Like, let's get all of the kids and the schools integrated with AI. But right now, Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, is calling on schools to stop allowing digital devices like iPads, AI integration, not for everybody, but just through pre-K through second grade. What do you think of this? Like, when is an appropriate time to start using devices and tech in schools?
Well, I think I read an interesting article in the Atlantic last night about we're having a crisis in agency now, and people having a sense of losing control completely, and AI is certainly accelerating that or causing it in the first place, really. I think that Randy Weingarten's right to say we ought to be thinking more closely about regulations and we ought to put some boundaries on it. Whether there's an absolute standard that we could promulgate from a federal level on that, I don't think is probably a wise idea. There are a lot of good programs that are out there and available for kids. Some of my grandchildren are doing things at preschool level that, I wouldn't want to outlaw those things, and I wouldn't want to say to educators you couldn't use those in the early years. I'd have real worries about chat bots for kids at really any stage right now. So I think, her idea of a pause on that for 5 years is a good idea. But I think overall she's right. She's right about a couple things that the government, the problem is AI is moving faster than government can move, and government doesn't know quite what to do in terms of how to respond and how to regulate this. So we need to do better at that. And we should have concerns that this government seems to be in bed with all the people leading AI, and therefore the likelihood that they're going to get active on regulating and controlling this is not very high. So we should be concerned about that. So I appreciate the call that she's bringing to it. I don't agree with some of the particulars, but I think on the whole she's on the right page.
Which
here.
particulars do you not agree with?
Well, I wouldn't ban the iPads or anything altogether from pre-second grade. I think educators got to use judgment, and I think there's some good tools that are available to be used, and I would encourage educators to use them and encourage kids to use them at home, because kids who have privilege are getting access to these kinds of things at home. So if we outlaw them in schools, it's going to lead to a disproportionality. Obviously, Jonathan Haidt, who's cited in Randy Weingarten's comments, is right. We've got kids overly attached to social media and to screens, and we need to do more to interrupt that. But at the same time, out-and-out bans at certain age levels, I don't think makes sense. I think educators got to exercise judgment.
My challenge with that is the all or nothing approach. I mean, my daughter, rightly at 25, is often telling me to get off my phone, but I'm reading a book on my phone, or I'm reading a magazine on my phone, or I'm playing Wordle on my phone, which are things I would have done 50 years ago with a paper and a pencil. So it's not like I'm on my phone. I'm playing a game on my phone, and to have this blanket approach to it. And to your point, which I was going to raise, which I have always made sure my daughter had the literacy to compete with the wealthy, privileged kids, right? I made her take horseback riding. I made her play tennis, right? And they were rec camps and all that kind of stuff, because I didn't want her to not have advantages that the rich kids and wealthy kids had.
Yeah.
And if we take away access to the things that the wealthy kids are learning and the privileged kids are learning, then we end up feeding into that gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Totally. I was visiting with my granddaughter yesterday. She's learning music on, she's 8 years old, learning music online. She is learning Spanish, to speak Spanish, with Duolingo online and things of this nature. So she's getting all this outside of school. And it's an advantage. It's going to advantage her. So somehow, schools ought to be working with families to say, okay, here is appropriate usage of this educational tool, and here's where you don't want to let them go off track and get tied up in social media and all of the excesses and dependencies that go along with that. And the chat box are a real problem now. I mean, the chat bots, having these personal relationships with people, connecting with adults and students, for that matter, in a way that seems highly personalized and imitates being in a personal relationship, but has nothing to do with feelings.
Paul, my chat box thinks I'm great.
Yeah,
it tells me all the time, "Good try, Sue. Try again. I see what you're doing there. You're so smart. What's the problem?"
Yeah, exactly. It's 100% flattery, all directed our way.
It is amazing how quickly these chatbots learn. We use Google Gemini in my house, and now we get like the daily briefing, and it's like yesterday it was prepare for your appearance on BPR for Jim and Margery, and it just knows everything.
Good question, Trenni. This might be helpful for your appearance coming up on BPR.
It's wild. Speaking of AI being helpful, I'm assuming there are some issues with this, but on the surface, at least, it looks good that USC is getting $200 million from the Stevens family, NVIDIA board members, largest shareholder of NVIDIA stocks. But the donation is for advancement in research and educational tools at the college level. Is that maybe a better use of AI, or am I just being too utopian with that?
No, I mean, I think what the USC donation and the frameworks and boundaries that are put on it suggest is they don't feel they can compete really in the research domain and the product development domain for AI. I mean, AI is paying people $250 million salaries to come work for them these days. So they can't compete with the private sector in developing the AI tool. But they can be out front in terms of how we apply that tool in higher education, because it's kind of an existential crisis in higher education, figuring out what should we be preparing young people to be able to know and to do? What are the truly human things that relate to human consciousness as we move forward? 10 years ago, we were telling everybody, oh, we ought to be preparing people to code, and everybody ought to have a coding program. And now those are disappearing overnight. And so a lot of institutions aren't really clear on where this is going to take us. We spent a lot of time in higher education being preoccupied with plagiarism and intellectual property, and those are real concerns and need attention. But really, it's what's this going to do to the workforce, and what kinds of skills are going to still be necessary after this tidal wave, which we can't really stop, of AI kind of comes over us. What's the place for universities, and where will the investment be worthwhile for parents to make? I mean, parents spending $500,000 or the equivalent in terms of loans and everything to put people through college, and that's has appeared to be the gold standard for how to get ahead economically in our society. But now that's open to some questions. So colleges and universities are trying to figure out, where are they headed? What are they preparing for? And then how do you use these tools, in classrooms? And, for example, I have some courses in which I'm starting to use AI to produce simulations that get, our students engaged in real life situations that they use AI to figure out, to map out. But then they make presentations and they get their presentations critiqued through AI and so forth. So I think we got to use it. It's just a question of how to. And USC will pay some particular attention to that.
I taught a semester at Emerson last year, and I had a one class where everyone interviewed my AI, interviewed Claude about the future of press and newspapers and television reporting. And what I love about it, as soon as I did that, the entire class thought I was using AI the entire time.
Yeah.
These kids
She was
today-
only using it like 75%.
right,
of the
75.
time.
Well, no, it's 49%. So yeah, it's definitely.
Well, it's pervasive.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So we can't. The idea that you can resist it. I mean, I have some students who are advanced mid-career students who have been saying, well, I don't really like where this is taking us as a society. I don't like what it represents. I don't like the corporate aspects of this. I'm not going to deal with it. And I'm trying to say, well, whether love it or hate it, you better learn it because you're going to be swamped in it. And even if you want to oppose it, you better know how it operates in order to figure things out in terms of the future.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the here and now, which of course is an ongoing, perennial, and annual conversation about the teacher layoffs, the budget issues. I as we're watching the budgeting process in the city of Boston right now, no one wants their category of whatever they care about cut.
Right.
And we continue to see threats of strikes in towns and cities regarding paying teachers what we all believe they should be paid, but at the same time coming up with where the money is going to come from, especially with our Proposition 2.5 and challenges around raising taxes. What's your take on what's happening with teacher pay right now, with unions, and how towns and cities are responding to it?
Well, I mean, in a certain sense, there's nothing new here. I mean, this is the tension of balancing a family budget. It's the tension of everybody but the federal government has, which is you got to equal your revenues and your expenses because we have to present balanced budgets at the local and state level. I had to work hard on this when I was in office, and we'd go out to budget hearings with people, and every constituency group who had a program would come forward to say, don't cut us. In fact, we need an increase. And I'd say, okay, well, I'm ready to hear that, but would you tell me where I'm going to get the money for it if our revenues are down? What else would you cut, or what other source of revenue would be there? So there's always been a tension between, how much we spend. We spend 80% of our budgets typically in public education on salaries and on personnel costs. So how much are we going to increase those costs relative to other more discretionary expenses that having to do with everything from class size, how we apportion our students, to what programs we have, to our facilities and things of that nature. So this tension exists. In recent years, the unions have been very aggressive in Massachusetts in terms of coming forward and pushing for wages. And in many cases, that's completely justified. Teachers in many situations, not all by any means, are underpaid, and they're looking for fair compensation. But at the same time, if you have to have a balanced budget and this is all you have, you're up against it. The question of Proposition 2.5 is a completely separate question. I mean, we're in a housing crisis as well. So if we want to increase taxes on local property taxes without, a Proposition 2.5 cap, then we're going to increase the price of housing, and this is going to compound already dire problems that we have in Massachusetts. So I don't see anything really new here. It's just the tensions working out in kind of strident ways, particularly in Boston right now.
Speaking of something that has been an issue really since the 50s or 60s, Massachusetts leaders are facing school desegregation lawsuit. Once again, this is an age-old problem of education equality. Is it as simple as, as suggested in the article, that kids who are in certain communities then get bused to different communities, or is that not the right solution? Because then you have this poor kid who's on a bus for an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half. It just feels to me there's no simple solution, or at least we haven't tried to find one yet.
No, there isn't. There isn't a silver bullet. I mean, we've been at this for a long time. I mean, the primary cause of school segregation is housing segregation, and we have rampant housing segregation, and we have a longstanding tradition, which exists in virtually every other state, that, the biggest form of school choice in the United States is where you choose to live. And those who have the financial resources to be able to move can choose where to be, and that tends to lead to segregation on income, certainly, and often on race and ethnicity and religion and things of that nature. So the most segregated students in Massachusetts typically are white students in suburban school systems, or rural school systems, where it's predominantly white students. But it's been a big issue with respect to what we know about for example, Rod Shetty at Opportunity Insights at Harvard has done a lot of work recently about relationships between kids who come from backgrounds of concentrated poverty. The degree to which they have relationships with people from other social classes is they actually a primary determinant, as important as family background and what socioeconomic class you're born into, in determining whether or not you'll be economically mobile in life. So unless we undo those boundaries, which most people view as a political impossibility, and those who filed the suit, interestingly, did not choose to attack those boundaries. But they're proposing a number of voluntary ways and means. Many of them have been tried other places, in Connecticut, for example, where they did desegregation, and tried in Hartford to set up a number of magnet schools that would pull people in from the suburbs to attend school in the city, with only modest desegregation impact when all is said and done in those circumstances. We have a school choice law in Massachusetts now, but it enables any community who wants to opt out, to not participate in it. So what you have is often, urban systems who are willing to open their doors to kids to come in, but the suburbs surrounding them aren't willing to open their doors. So we have programs like METCO. Now, METCO does put the burden on kids leaving the school system to be on long bus rides. On the other hand, when they get out to the suburbs, they tend to, not always, and not in every category, to get a richer, broader educational experience, and there are a whole bunch of success stories that come out of that. Now, are those success stories related to, that group of people who signed up for METCO have families who are really pushing hard on their education, and they would have done well? It's a kind of brain drain for the school system that they're leaving. In other words, when those students leave, the students who remain behind are more typically racially isolated and typically have more challenges than other students. So it's not necessarily a good thing for the districts that they're leaving. But it's an attempt to circumvent. So there's some money that they're suggesting, and this is an approach in making transportation free. And they're proposing magnet schools. They're proposing different kinds of vocational schools and things like that. So I think those are good ideas, but I think the likelihood is it'll have a modest impact, and a suit like this is going to be in the courts for a while.
It's too bad for those kids,
Yeah.
that they're in the middle of a fight. And in the interim, they don't always get everything that they need.
Well, and I have to say, it's also not all about the schools. It's about the surround of children's lives. We have children growing up in poverty, can't get health care, can't get adequate food, and a whole bunch of other things that affect whether they're going to do well in school or not. So it isn't just the schools. We've got to think more broadly about this.
Hard to learn on an empty stomach. We've been speaking with Paul Reville, former Secretary of Education for Massachusetts and a professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, where he also leads the Ed Redesign Lab. Paul, thanks. Nice to see you in person.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Coming up after this quick break, Tufts food policy analyst Corby Kummer on the collapse of Clover. I'm Trenni Casey in for Margery Egan. She is Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR and 89.7 GBH and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, Boston-based wearable tech unicorn Whoop has emerged as a local business darling, with a valuation of over $10 billion and an IPO expected later this year. We'll get down to the business of making it in today's tech landscape. Plus, what happens when healthy habits get gamified? That's the Curiosity Desk, today at 1 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. UMass, the state's flagship public research university, empowers students to be the future in the pursuit of progress for Massachusetts and beyond. More at umass.edu. And Blythewald, presenting Music at Sunset. Concertgoers can experience a variety of local music while watching the sailboat races on Narragansett Bay. Wednesday nights at Blythewald in Bristol, Rhode Island. Blythewald.org.
Welcome back to BPR on 89.7 GBH. Sue O'Connell and Trenni Casey in for Jim Browdy and Margery Egan. Of course, we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Don't worry, Jim and Margery, they'll be back tomorrow. They'll be at the BPL and they'll have Governor Maura Healey with them. But we are going to spend, what are we doing now? I'm reading the wrong thing.
No, you're not. You're reading the right thing. We have Corby
sure?
Kummer. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Corby. So there he is.
There he is.
We're talking food.
Hi, Trenni. Hi, Sue.
Suddenly I'm Margery. I was Jim earlier, but now I'm Margery.
It's okay. I mean, you've filled in with them so many times.
I know.
You've just sort of absorbed a little bit of both of their personalities.
It's like that horror movie I watched over the weekend.
What horror movie did you
Obsession.
watch?
We're calling you our Sue.
Here it is. All
So,
right, go ahead.
Corby, we want to start out talking to you about Clover. Back in the day, I loved Clover. I
Yeah.
loved that I had an option to go get I'm not a vegetarian, but every once in a while I like to eat plant-based foods. But it sort of fell apart. Their founder was, depending on who you believe, either resigned or was fired. They had some financial issues, and now it's just suddenly closed. Hundreds of jobs, nearly 200 jobs lost. What led to its demise? It seems like a very innovative, fast casual place 15 years ago when it popped up.
It's just a tragedy that all of the remaining locations of Clover are going to close, I think, this week. Ayer Muir, a board member, the founder, said he was devastated by it. There's lots of possible explanations, but let's go through what was great about the model. It was buying from local farms. It was plant-based food. It was there. It was really delicious. It was super cool. It started as a food truck at MIT, I think. Yep. And those of us who discovered it early, we were in the know. And then they rented a lot of premier locations, and apparently they didn't own any of their real estate. And so they were locked into these expensive leases. Prices of food, especially the kind of fresh fruits and vegetables they wanted, went up 30 to 50% after the pandemic, plus expensive leases. Lots of potential reasons in a very good Globe article. But basically, I don't want anyone to think that buying from local farms or converting to plant-based food is a bad idea. In this case, it wasn't economically sustainable for the Clover food chain. I hope they'll be back in some form, but it's a fantastic idea.
The challenges of running a restaurant are I don't think the list is long enough to talk. I mean, I worked at Friendly's when I was in high school, yes, and worked.
Did you wait tables?
I did. I was employee of the month when I was fired.
Of course you were.
And I would. We agreed to part.
Mhm.
And I also, worked in the bar manager, a nightclub business. And the costs of some things are so high, and your margin is so small. And if one bad thing happens, whether it's a management issue or a cost issue or a couple of bad snowstorms that knock you out. Especially with food, and it expires quickly. You got to get the right amount, as you've taught me a number of times, Corby. It's really such a pyramid of that could just collapse, and it seems like with Clover, it wasn't just one reason.
I hate that it's closing, and Boston and Cambridge could be really proud that we were the home of an extremely innovative model that was just great. And Sue is right. There's an endless number of things that can go wrong for a food business, but especially a restaurant that goes into a lot of bricks and mortar locations. And remember, it began as a food truck. And so expanding into beautiful prime locations got them locked into a lot of expensive contracts.
I do wonder, I can't remember where I read this, but recently I read an article about how so many of the new restaurants popping up in Boston are owned by larger restaurant groups, in large part because of the cost of food now, but also the real estate costs. Like, how difficult is it to own and operate a small local restaurant group or food group in the Boston area?
It's hugely difficult. And the Globe article quoted John Pepper of Boloco and also Ron Sheikh, who were both investors in it and for various reasons pulled out and severed their connections. But they both talked about the huge challenges of opening a restaurant. But we should also look at the huge challenges of operating a farm. And again, you can't own your own farmland. And one of the main reasons that the average age of farmers is over 60 in this country is because it's so tough ever to actually purchase land. So yes, in most cities you go into, in most airports, just every place, it's not locally owned restaurants or chains. It's places that can raise venture capital and have lots of economies of scale.
It's amazing. Anyway, we'll set up a tent. We'll go back to the food truck model. That's what'll happen. So President Trump, who inherited an economy that was recovering, is now making food more affordable, he says, after making it unaffordable. And I don't know about you, but I shop like everybody else does at the grocery store. And it is definitely not more affordable, even if I put more effort in than I usually do. He's quoting here, Corby, individual items that are indeed costs have come down. If I have to talk about the cost of eggs anymore in my lifetime, my head is going to scramble. There's no doubt.
You may have to.
The reasons why eggs become expensive and then are affordable and then go below has got probably not very much to do with Donald Trump, but we've got avocados are less expensive, butter, oil, and cheese. So if we just eat those things, I guess.
And you meant to mention eggs.
And eggs. I know. See,
You
thanks
can
a
eat,
lot.
you
You're
can eat an
torturing me.
avocado omelet every
The rest of
day
your
for
life.
every meal.
Why is he able to say that these prices are now more affordable? And is he correct?
Well, for so many reasons outside of his control, which is to say weather, ability of farmers to have labor to harvest things. So egg prices down 39%. So it's a sort of lesson in cherry picking data. And what I was surprised to see in this list of his claims about individual food items is how many of them were based in truth. So it actually did have cherry picked statistics. But there are a number of things that he left out in his report that factors pushing up food prices, which we can't forget, are incredible locking up of fertilizer for this spring's planting because of the Straits of Hormuz, which more than half of the world's fertilizer passes through. So that this year, farmers are incredibly challenged to be able to plant because they can't afford the rising price of scarce fertilizer, and also the rising prices of fuel. Again, because of Iran and the Straits of Hormuz, fuel prices are going to really raise the prices of food as the months go on, as harvests are much less. So a certain number of things just are completely outside of any administration's control, especially weather, the droughts that reduce the size of cattle herds, and beef prices are going way up. But then again, egg prices came down, mostly because flocks recovered after a huge decrease because of avian flu. So these things have nothing to do with policy, but a tremendous number of things in the food chain do have to do with policy, and fuel and fertilizer are going to greatly drive up food prices in the next months.
So it's only going to get worse. Awesome. All right, we have to get to this. We want to end on something fun. We don't always want to be downers. Kara Baskin wrote a column article in the Boston Globe. Mass teens love DoorDash. Parents aren't always thrilled. Apparently, the National Restaurant Association reports that half of U.S. consumers believe ordering delivery and takeout is an essential part of their lifestyle. 67% of Gen Z kids feel that way. And this whole story is about how parents are hearing their doorbell ring and it's a Big Mac from McDonald's or a Starbucks Frappuccino or ice cream from somewhere. Except if you buy a Big Mac from McDonald's, which might only be $5 or $6 if you buy it at McDonald's, but you add on the delivery fee and the service fee and all these other things, it becomes $27. Like, it is wild to me that kids have, we were just talking to Paul about like AI and technology, that a kid can just sit in their room and be like, you know what I want right now? Mom, I don't want that meatloaf you made. I'm going to order myself a Big Mac. And then they don't order for anyone else in their house. What do you make of this?
Listen, I was aghast. And Sue, I went to Friendly's was the big treat every Saturday lunch for a big beef and an awful. So I certainly remember Friendly's. The idea that I'd be able to, call them up, not that anybody uses the phone anymore, or dial them up and just get it delivered to my house. First of all, part of the fun was going down and seeing the waitresses, then called waitresses, like Sue, who were employee of the month, but probably hated working there and parted company soon afterward. But it was a sense of community. It was a gathering place. It was actually the only restaurant in my small, rural, northern Connecticut town. But now, adolescents can spend money the way they want to. I thought Kara Baskin did a terrific job in talking to a number of parents who were really angry that their kids were rejecting their food and going off and eating their own stuff, and others who were saying, okay, he's on student council, he's on track, he's got a job on top of it. If he wants to order in because it's 10 o'clock and he's gotten in from a track meet and also going to a political meeting, that's up to him. So it was a really mixed picture, but it was shocking how many teenagers order in their own food.
So I want to say this. Back in the 70s, when I was a teenager, my mother was a horrible cook. I could go on about what a terrible cook she was. I didn't know that pork chops were moist until I was about 28, okay? Ironically, she taught cooking to recently arrived immigrants through the UMass Extension Service, because teaching it and doing it, two totally different things. So I learned in third grade that I could order a TV dinner, have my mother buy TV dinners, like when you had, before the microwave, when you actually had to cook them. And I, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, I only ate TV dinners. Even if my mother was cooking the exact same thing, because I thought it was a perfectly arranged meal. I had my turkey, I had my gravy, I had my stuffing.
Did you eat on a TV tray while watching TV?
Tray, yes, because I just love that. I think it was probably as expensive related to what my mother was cooking in those days. So I'm all for it. That's what I say.
I'm all for it if the family actually eats at the same meal and talks to each other instead of looking at their screens, because nothing would be more important than that. And that was kind of a precursor. One of the kids quoted in Kara Baskin's really fun, good piece in the Globe said, to his mother, well, you could make better food.
Yeah, right.
Maybe if your food tasted better, I wouldn't be ordering from Chipotle or Cava or wherever the kid was ordering.
I do love how honest kids are today. All right, that's
That's
all
what it
the
is.
time. We are out of time. Corby Kummer, thank you so much for joining us. Executive Director at the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and senior lecturer at Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Corby, thanks again. We'll talk to you next week. Coming up after this quick break. Did you hear the boom on Saturday when a meteorite exploded off the coast? Is this a sign from our alien overlords? Are we ready for the Big Bang weigh-in next? I'm Trenni Casey. I'm in for Margery Egan. She is Sue O'Connell, in for Jim Browdy. You are listening to BPR on 89.7 GBH and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Before Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts was already fighting the crown over smallpox.
Would you rather have a risk of 1.5% or 9% fatality?
Tensions rose as colonists discovered the king's governor was concealing cases.
John Adams would have been very aware of these records. I mean, he sees the benefit for public health.
I'm Jennifer Moore. That story later today as part of our series From Colony to Commonwealth on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Native Plant Trust, a source for pollinator-friendly plants. Available at Garden in the Woods in Framingham. More at nativeplanttrust.org.
And the Boston Speaker Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings featuring Pete Buttigieg, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, war photographer Lindsay Addario, and former U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns. BostonSpeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR on 89.7 GBH. Sue O'Connell, Trenni Casey in the house for Jim Browdy and Margery Egan. We, of course, are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will indeed be back tomorrow at the BPL with Governor Maura Healey. We are going to spend the rest of the show with a boom. In case you were living under a rock, missed it over the weekend, a 3-foot wide chunk of space rock hurtled through the atmosphere on Saturday at roughly 75,000 miles per hour. It caused a loud double boom that shook buildings across Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. And here's what it sounded like in Danvers, courtesy of the AP and Stanley Fung. Yep. NASA estimates the energy of its breakup was equivalent to about 300 tons of TNT. I have no idea what that means. So a big boom indeed. There it is again. We'd like to hear from you, 877-301-8970. Did you feel it? And did you get you thinking like, oh my gosh, is this the big one? What am I going to do when the big one comes? Or maybe you were thinking,
You're just going to die.
The aliens are here. So we want to hear from you. Call or text. We'd love to hear your experience of the meteorite of 2026. 877-301-8970. Did you hear it?
I heard it. My husband and I were hanging out.
Yeah.
And you know what's weird? So we have 2 dogs, and normally fireworks, thunder, they're kind of triggered by that stuff. Like they don't love really loud noises. They did not react at all. And I heard this boom, and I was like, did you hear that? And Sean goes, yeah, I heard that. And then it just, nothing happened. And he said, we have to go pick up my golf club from Dick's. So
yeah,
can
there
we
you
get
go.
going? And then all these texts started to come through from other people. Did you guys hear? Did you hear it? And then I was down the rabbit hole like the reporter I am. First, I texted Jody on our assignment desk. I should have texted you. I texted Monica Madej. I was trying to think of
I
like.
wouldn't have known.
I was just trying to think like, did anyone here? Was anybody working? You thought it was, so I have a friend who lives in Charlestown, and they've had some structural issues with a fire escape. She thought for sure a fire escape finally fell. But to find out more about what exactly happened, it is the all NBC takeover today on BPR here. We have Pete Bouchard, our chief meteorologist over at NBC 10 Boston. He has been kind enough to join us. Pete, what happened? And also, here's what I really want to know. What if that thing didn't hit the ocean and hit land?
Yeah, what if I was out paddling in my kayak?
You guys, it's not, okay, so. Okay.
Are you laughing at us because we don't understand science, Pete?
He spoke at my graduation.
Oh, you're talking Howard Dean. Yeah, that's what I think it should have sounded
no,
like.
I'm not. there's a lot of people who had a lot of input on this, and a lot of different scenarios could have played out, right? It could have landed over land. It could have been smaller chunks. They might have shattered a windshield or maybe put a dent in a roof. They're not going to take out, your whole house. It was a 3-foot wide meteor. It was not huge. These can go up to the size of a school bus. The last big one, it was a super bolide. It hit in Russia, Chelyabinsk. I think I got that right. Chelyabinsk. That was in 2013 in February. So it was a long time ago. That was a super bolide. That was 60 feet. So that one broke up and went into pieces and did hit buildings and destroyed a lot of stuff. It did make it as fragments. Remember, when it goes into the atmosphere, it's going to bust up no matter what, no matter how big it is, because the atmosphere is going to break it up with the heat. So we have the bolides, we have the super bolides that are the size of a bus. This one was just a regular bolide. Then we have the smaller meteors, and any given night, every minute you can see a shooting star or a meteor. Usually those are specks of dust or maybe the size of a nickel. They burn out and they create a tiny little flash. So the bolides are the ones that you can see at night visibly. I mean, they light up the whole sky. And at daytime, sometimes. You did see the video out of Rome, New York with this one too. So, I mean, varying degrees. And this one was really not that big of a deal. People are like, well, why don't we go out and track these things? How come we don't have satellites looking for them? In the vastness of space, it's like needle in a haystack. It's ridiculous. You're not going to have any kind of accuracy. You're not going to be able to see these things coming because they're moving thousands of miles per hour. And really, what's it worth? You can put up a satellite because they burn out in the atmosphere anyway. They're virtually harmless most of the time.
And
so,
yeah, and we've got so much junk up around the planet. I'm sure we'd be running for cover every 2 seconds because there's some paint chip off a shuttle that's burning up in the atmosphere.
I mean, I guess I'm just more worried about like I know this doesn't happen all that often, but like, should we do we track ones that could completely destroy Earth? Like, is Ben Affleck on the ready to go and intercept it in space? That's what I'm worried about, Pete.
No, and don't worry about that because you know what? That is happening right now. They're near Earth objects and they are being tracked. They're sizable, and we do track those. There's reason to track those. Now you're getting into the city killers, as they call them, and then the planet killers. Those are the ones that are big. I mean, those are the worries, right? And yes, those are being tracked. And there's a whole program. You can find it online. I forget the name of it. It's Near Earth.
Oh, great. That'll give Trenni something
objects.
to do.
Pete's going to walk by my desk today, and I'm just going to be like, for the rest, like I used to watch like the bears during Fat Bear Week. I'm just going to be now watching like the Near Earth possible destruction live videos feed.
Yeah. It's a near Earth object, NEO, like, from the Matrix.
Near Earth object.
So, Pete, did you get excited when this happened? Is this one of those?
Do meteorologists geek out on this?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, it is, otherworldly. It's unexpected. We don't track them. They happen. And there might have been one a day before in South Carolina, right? We don't know that for fact, but there was thunder and no one knew what happened. And there were no flights and no Mach 3 planes and jets and anything going by. So yeah, they're unique and they can, be big sometimes, as we found out in Russia in 2013. So they're big objects, and we are meteorologists.
Yeah. So I was near Pete Bouchard's desk one time when something exciting happened, and I imagine this is the noise that he let out when he heard about the meteor.
Also, Coda in Boston and Andy in Fairhaven are not yelling. They're educating us, correcting us. And it is a meteor that explodes. It's a meteorite when it hits the ground.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
sorry.
Okay, great.
Correct.
Listen, people. I'm just a talking head. I just read whatever's on the script put in front of me.
Yeah, that's it. All right, Pete Bouchard.
And in space, they're meteoroids.
Oh, okay.
Meteor. Yes, there's three different classifications. Meteor is a meteoroid that hits Earth, and then a meteorite is the remaining piece that makes it to the ground.
Mr. Science.
So there are 3 different terms.
Okay, great.
This is great.
This is like, why do I need to go with you or Tevin into a classroom? This was
Mr.
great.
Science. All right. See you later, Pete.
Bye, Pete. See you in a little bit.
At work. Bye.
Glad I could help.
Thank
you.
Pete Bouchard, NBC 10 meteorologist.
Chief
Keeping it-
meteorologist.
Chief meteorologist, right. Keeping
Pete
us real.
Bouchard.
Okay. All right. Yes, we got anonymous texture wants to know, will NBC send Sue out in the Thunder truck
will you?
for the next meteor explosion? Yes, if we could tell in advance, I'd certainly go check.
That's true. We're not tracking
Absolutely.
this.
All right.
so
Let's
we don't
get
know.
to some calls from our listeners and text. Gabe in Rhode Island. Hey, Gabe, welcome to Boston Public Radio with Trenni and Sue. What's on your mind? How's the meteor?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
So yeah, I'm from Rhode Island, and I was just like, it's wild to think about that this meteor that's causing all this brouhaha was 3 feet wide, and the meteor that hit when the dinosaurs went extinct was roughly like 6 miles wide.
Yeah.
And, caused like massive like disruption to the planet, basically killed everything on the planet. So I'm just like, I'm thinking about like how we're all kind of like, whoa, that did everyone hear that? And now I'm trying to imagine like 65 million years ago being like a triceratops, and what they must have thought when this giant like 6 mile wide hunk of space rock like just crashed to the planet. I don't know. I just think it's cool to think about the different like size perspectives in that way.
I mean, I went deep down a rabbit hole on Saturday. Like,
She did.
what ended, which I was told like by Gemini, it was not the dinosaur era. It was the Mesozoic era. I was like, listen, I was just trying to make it easy.
Whatever,
Whatevs,
AI.
Whatever. But yes, when it hit Earth, it caused a massive tsunami, which then like covered up entire islands, and it triggered a volcanic explosion, which sent ash and fire into the skies, which then burned the earth. And all that survived were certain like fish and aquatic species and birds. So technically we still have dinosaurs on the earth, but they are now something we call birds.
See, it was a moment for us all to get educated. Thanks, Gabe, for calling. Good job, Trenni. Someone's going to correct you on all that. in just a second.
100%.
No,
I don't know. It was just Gemini. So if don't blame me, blame Gemini.
Chris in Cambridge texted us. He said, I heard it, or she or he said, I heard it. I was hopeful, and then nothing. We were all still, unfortunately, here. The big one can't come soon enough. The best thing that could happen to this planet is for humans to go away, and then everything can go back to living in peace.
I got
We're
news for you. I got
optimistic.
news for you, Chris. It's not just going to be us that's gone. Everything.
everything else
It's
will
like
go
a
too.
big start over when
All
it
right,
happens.
Let's go to Bonnie in Malden. Hello, Bonnie. Welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hi, thank you very much. I was home when I heard this sound, and at first I thought it was a tree somewhere around my neighborhood falling, because it sounded like definitely something hitting the ground. And I looked several times, couldn't find any trees down. And I thought, well, maybe it was thunder, maybe it was a crack of thunder, but I thought it didn't really sound like thunder. I really was perplexed as to what it was, and it was loud enough that my windows in my house rattled. The house kind of moved. Now, I think it's pretty cool. Like, even if it's 3 feet wide, it landed supposedly in Cape Cod Bay somewhere. The fact that I could feel it where I live, it's pretty amazing that it was only 3 feet wide and had such an impact. So I think that's pretty incredible. And despite what the meteorologist said, something coming at you at 75,000 miles an hour through the atmosphere, I'm glad it wasn't coming at me.
No,
'cause
absolutely.
I don't think you have time to duck.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. I'm always struck by how quiet, and this is, I don't mean to take a dark turn here, but, the day after 9/11, when I lived in Mission Hill and Roxbury at the time and the airport was shut down, how quiet it was, right? Without all the airplanes, certainly lots of people weren't driving around. So you imagine how often, we would hear things like this if it weren't. Jamie's making fun of me because I said on the screen here, because I said I wasn't going to go dark, and then it's 9/11.
Like,
I'm talking about the silence of the nature
Yes.
and nature restoring and hearing.
That was
things.
sort of like 2020 during the COVID shutdown. Like everything was quiet. You could go out for a walk and you could actually hear like birds sing.
Yeah, and I saw a squirrel with a lobster tail running to feed its family, and I thought, oh, good, nature's recovering. All right, let's go to Roxy in the car. Roxy, welcome to Boston Public Radio.
It's great to be here. So, yeah, I heard the boom. It shook my house. And then for some reason, I think I'd been cooped up all weekend. I was like, I need to go into investigative reporter / scientist, amateur scientist mode. So there had been in Newton, like some manhole covers exploded recently. And I like went for a walk around, but and then was like looking on all these internet sites. I called the non-emergency police and they were like, yeah, the boom, we know, no information. And I'm like sharing this with our neighborhood text thread of parents because people were like, let's just make sure there's not an emergency. But luckily, one of my fellow neighbors works for the Smithsonian and has lots of the inside scoop to NASA. So he was ultimately one of the people who worked on like the official press release. And so I was able to be like, okay, good. I can stop like trying to quote every like meteorologist who has something on Reddit. But yeah, my logic was something like, okay, there's more people who work for MIT who live in Somerville. So I'm going to go look at the Somerville subreddit.
Very
and
good.
See, who's posting. Yeah.
Glad
So
it wasn't just
we all
me,
figured
Roxy.
it out.
Glad it wasn't just me. It was like deep down the rabbit hole, texting everyone I knew on Reddit, on Blue Sky, because I can't do Twitter anymore. Instagram, I was like searching everywhere.
Yep. All right.
Trying to
Thanks for
figure
the
out what it
call.
was.
Yep. I didn't hear it at all. At all. I didn't hear it at all. I'm on Fort Hill in Roxbury. I don't know what the heck I was doing.
You must have just been like you had to have been distracted because it was very loud. I thought maybe it was like in the north end, we're by the why am I blanking on the name of the ship? Our old Ironsides, and they fire off the cannon, and they had fired it off for an unknown reason. So I was like, oh, do they fire the cannon again?
Well, they did the turnaround. So, I mean, I'm used to hearing things like I'm near Fenway Park, so it might be a flyover. I'm near the Orange Line, and it might be the commuter rail.
Explosion.
I've got, all kinds of construction around me. So if I heard it, I didn't pay that much attention to it. Let's go to Deborah in Brighton. Deborah, welcome to Boston Public Library. I was going to say Boston Public Radio. What are your thoughts on this meteoroid?
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking my call. I often wonder, you never hear any reports about going down, talking about going down, what did you say, Sue? A
rabbit hole? Yeah, Trenni in a rabbit hole, yeah.
Yeah. I always think of the aquatic life, and it's never mentioned. There's no reports of, but when something like that hits the ocean, doesn't that cause great
stress?
Or even in war, I think of the bombs in that are being, dropped in the strait or wherever they are, and what that impact on the ocean life.
That's it. That's an excellent question. I think I'm gonna when
we're
we
gonna
get
ask
back
when we
to
get
the
back to the office. We're gonna ask Pete that.
No, I'm gonna have Trenni work on that.
Deborah, well, tomorrow I'm coming back to talk sports tomorrow with Jim and Margery. I will try and we will also add that. By the way, guys, I'm told the dinosaur has left us a voicemail with a statement on the meteor, and we have sound.
That dinosaur is not taking it as seriously as they should be.
Well, they're
back.
I
agree.
don't know that dinosaur does not know what's coming.
Here, Edgar B. Herwick III.
Hello,
Welcome.
hello.
Did you hear
Thank
the
you.
meteorite?
I did not.
I don't know.
Meteor. Well, do you know what the difference between a meteor?
Well, now we were schooled by many people who told us
Yeah.
that we were dumb. Which, not the first time, but the last time
I'm going to do
today.
a TikTok, and I'm going to say it wrong, so people will correct me, and it will help engagement.
That is going to be some engaging content right there,
Yes.
Sue. No, I didn't hear it. I was in the car driving, and then my phone started blowing up, like all my friends and stuff. Did you hear that? What happened? What happened? So, I mean, it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of cool.
Nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Well, we don't know.
It's
According
better.
to our last caller, a couple of fish might have visited the
I know, we
fishies.
gotta
They
ask.
check
Do you know
on that.
about Wethersfield, Connecticut?
No.
So Wethersfield, Connecticut, which is like some town in Connecticut, in 1971, a meteor comes down and hits a person's house. And then 11 years later, 1982, in the same town, another meteor comes in and hits another house.
I want to look at that.
Isn't that crazy?
So what happened to the people living in the house?
Nothing. I mean, I think everybody was fine. Nobody was hurt. Don't quote me on that. Somebody who knows more about
Something
this.
else for you to work on today, Trenni.
figure out what happened. I mean, I guess, you know what? I don't think I did search because I didn't want to know. I was like, if I'm going to go, I just wanted to go quietly.
All right, what's coming up on your show?
Well, we're gonna start with a little more on the meteor. We're gonna talk with Kelly Beatty from Sky and Telescope magazine. And we're gonna really get into a little bit of the science of what happened and what it means, if anything, looking forward. And so that's gonna be a good conversation. We're really looking forward to it.
Can you ask about the aquatic life and what happens when it lands in the ocean?
We will absolutely ask that question in just the next few minutes. We got you.
Stay tuned.
All right, thank you for listening to another edition of BPR on 89.7 GBH. Keep up with us 24/7. We have a podcast, TikTok page. I know that's a big one for Jim and Margery. They love to talk. Boston Public Radio is where you can find them. Tune in tomorrow. Jim and Margery will be back. They're going to be at the Boston Public Library with Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey from 11 to noon for Ask the Governor, plus CNN's John King and me. You get to hear from me again, Trenni Casey. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, Ariana Gonzalez. Our stream today, Maddie Geyer and Brad Lewis. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie the Dinosaur Bologna. Stay tuned for the Curiosity Desk. It's right after us on 89.7 GBH Culture Show with Jared Bowen at 2. I'm Trenni Casey. She is Sue O'Connell. Have a great day. See you guys tomorrow.
From the stories of centuries past to discoveries that will define our future, How Did We Get Here's how-tos and more. Journey with us down the rabbit hole on the Curiosity Desk. Coming up next on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Boston Ballet, presenting The Sleeping Beauty. The timeless fairy tale is brought to life with exquisite choreography and Tchaikovsky's glorious score. Performed live by the Boston Ballet Orchestra, now through June 7th. Tickets at bostonballet.org.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping customers achieve their vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding them from design to completion. With showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Today on the Curiosity Desk, well, it's not every day that a meteor explodes over New England. Of course, as you've probably heard, either on the news or in a more literal sense, that's exactly what happened around 2 o'clock this past Saturday. We start off with everything we know and everything we don't about that boloid meteor, that potential fishy squisher, that fireball that rained down from the sky. Then, as hype around the Boston-based wearable tech company Whoop continues to grow to a fever pitch, we're looking into what it takes for tech startups to take off from ideation to IPO. And while we're on wearable tech, we ask if turning your health data, specifically the kind of sleep you get, into a quasi-game. Can it influence real-world habits? Don't hit that snooze. It's all ahead this hour on the Curiosity Desk.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Iran says it is suspending talks via mediators with the U.S. over Israeli military operations in Lebanon and in Gaza. Israel has continued to bomb South Lebanon and the southern suburbs of Beirut, considered Hezbollah strongholds, even though a ceasefire was reached in April. Here's NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi.
The semi-official Iranian news agency, Tasnim, which is associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, said that Tehran was demanding the end of what it called the aggressive and brutal Israeli army operations in Gaza and Lebanon. It also called for the complete withdrawal of Israeli military forces from Lebanon. Iran said that unless those conditions were fulfilled, talks with the U.S. to end the war would halt. There was no immediate confirmation from senior Iranian officials that messages, mostly relayed via Pakistan, between the warring parties were being suspended. The U.S. and Iran said last week they were close to a tentative 60-day ceasefire extension and framework to start talks to end the war, but the agreement is waiting on President Trump's approval. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News.
With rising gas prices, an unpopular war in Iran, and affordability concerns top of mind, American voters say they are unhappy with Republican leadership. NPR's Stephen Fowler has this report on the party's effort to explain why they should stay in power.
There's roughly 5 months to go until the November general election, and the GOP message is mixed at best. At a campaign event in Iowa last month, Vice President Vance said the election
is actually not any specific question of public policy.
But voters disagree. Polls show Americans have soured on multiple Trump administration policies. At a cabinet meeting last week, President Trump touted policies like a prescription drug savings program as proof his administration was working. But in a defense of the Iran war, he also said,
I don't care about the midterms.
The next set of midterm primaries Tuesday include key races in Iowa and California. Stephen Fowler, NPR News.
New Jersey officials say several protesters were arrested overnight for ignoring a curfew at Newark's Delaney Hall. The Immigration Detention Center has been the site of days of clashes between law enforcement officers and protesters over allegedly poor facility conditions. This morning on NPR, Democratic Senator Cory Booker spoke of outside agitators, but stopped short of accusing them of inciting violence in the first place.
We have a lot of people from the Proud Boys to Greg Bovino coming from outside of our state to try to escalate violence and conflict in front of the facility and distract from the moral urgency of this facility that should be closed.
That's Democratic Senator Cory Booker on NPR's Morning Edition. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Former Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell used one of his first major public appearances since leaving office to defend independent institutions while accepting the Profile and Courage Award yesterday. The award, presented by Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, honors Powell's efforts to preserve the Federal Reserve's independence. He spoke at the JFK Presidential Library overlooking Boston Harbor.
Here at home, our great public and private institutions are the foundation and the embodiment of our democracy. Our universities and research institutions are a critical national resource and the envy of the world. The same is true of our Constitution, our legislative bodies, and our court system.
Powell's remarks were some of his most direct defenses of Fed independence, warning that a single administration's decision to remove bank officials over policy differences would open the way for future elected officials to follow suit and ultimately undermine the credibility that the Fed has spent decades building. Well, more than 270 graduates crossed the stage yesterday as UMass Chan Medical School celebrated its class of 2026 commencement on the campus green. The Worcester Guardian reports it was a capacity crowd of family members, friends, and faculty on hand to watch as graduates in medicine, nursing, and biomedical sciences were urged to balance technological innovation with compassion and service by School Chancellor Michael Collins, who presided over the commencement of exercises for the 20th and final time. 58 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, offering investors choices from self-directed investing to full-service wealth management all in one place. Committed to helping investors in any life stage with their investing goals. More at schwab.com.
Hey, welcome to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We're streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Why don't you join us there? So for those of you who have been listening to BPR and have been sticking around, you know this. Around 2 o'clock on Saturday, people all along the East Coast from Delaware all the way up to Montreal heard two loud, mysterious booms, one after the other. Some security cam footage has been making the rounds. If you missed it, it sounded something like this. Turns out that noise, yes, you know it, a meter-wide meteor exploding in the sky somewhere over Massachusetts with a force equal to, according to estimates, 300 tons of TNT. We are joined now via Zoom by Kelly Beatty, senior editor of Sky and Telescope magazine, the only person I would really want to be talking to about this on the heels of such an event. Kelly, thanks for making the time. Welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
A great pleasure, Edgar. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's unpack what we know, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about what we don't know. But let's start with the sound, because I think most people who did experience this experienced the sound around 2 o'clock. What was the sound?
You know, meteors come in all kinds of sizes, and I'm sure everyone has seen one of these shooting stars in the evening sky, but those are just tiny, maybe the size of a pea or even a grain of sand. What we had on Saturday was something much, much bigger. As you mentioned, it was estimated to be roughly 3 feet across, and that's just rough. But the point is that when those come in, and they're coming in very fast, anywhere from 10 to 20 miles per second, they hit the atmosphere and they get a lot of resistance. And so a shock wave develops and they literally explode. And so we call this a bolide. It's brighter than a fireball. It's an exploding fireball, and it's just too bad that it was cloudy and raining that day, because it would have been spectacular in the sky.
Was it seen in the sky? I mean, did we have like equipment or anything above the cloud line that could see it? I mean, is there any way to see it, even though we didn't get to see the spectacular thing you're talking about on the ground?
Well, of course, you could always be somewhere where there were no clouds, and a couple of the videos, there's 1 or 2 videos making the rounds from as far away as New York, where it was not raining, and they could see this. It's still high in the atmosphere, so it's 40, 50 miles up, and that makes it visible over a great distance. We can certainly see it from space. There is I've seen some still images from a NOAA weather satellite looking down on the northeast here, and there's definitely a flash. And there are other satellites that we haven't heard from yet, Edgar. The Department of Defense has what we shall call assets that are in space to try to determine if a rocket were to be fired, as an early warning thing. Rockets give off heat, and that's how they detect them, those assets. And so does an exploding meteor. And so when that happens, they show up, and there's actually a Defense Department database of really bright fireballs that have taken place over the last few decades. And this, I expect, would be added to that list. And the important thing is, once we hear from the DoD, we'll have a much better idea of how much energy was really involved.
Speaking of the how much energy thing, I mean, one of the things that I think, generally speaking, and I think a lot of people sometimes struggle to put things that happen regarding space into context, right? We hear something like 300 tons of TNT, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's an enormous explosion. But really, I don't really have context for that. And like when you talk about the speed with which it's coming in, again, that seems insane, but also kind of on the scale of outer space and the way things move, maybe not that big a deal. Can you sort of try to put this a little bit into context for us in terms of like how unusual or usual this is?
All right. So the rarity is pretty significant. There are probably only a handful of events all around the world every year that are this big and bold. And so the fact that this one occurred during daylight, again, I'm cursing the fact that it was raining, because we individually are likely to see only one of these daylight bolides ever in our life, and we missed the chance. So there you go. But in terms of the energy, this energy is just an estimate also. You take the mass of the object and you take the speed of the object, and you can extract the energy from that. And so 300 tons of TNT is nothing compared to, for example, an atomic bomb, which is in the thousands, if not millions of tons of TNT. So we're talking about, if it were to hit the ground intact, it would do pretty significant damage. I would say maybe to a couple of blocks. If it hit, maybe we'll be lucky enough and it'll hit the State House. Who knows? But in any case, it's not. I would put it kind of on a scale of the kinds of explosions that are happening during wars around the world with some of these hypersonic missiles and stuff. It is not going to destroy Boston,
right?
All right, if it were to have hit, for example.
We're talking with Kelly Beatty, senior editor of Sky and Telescope magazine. We're talking about the meteor this weekend. You know, Kelly, you and I have talked in the past, and, you know, one of the things we've talked about in the times that we have spoken are beautiful meteor showers that we sort of move through on our planet as we're journeying around the sun every year. Is this that kind of a meteor? Do we know where this came from? Is it, you know, part of a meteor shower? What do we know?
Such an educated, nuanced question.
Well, thank you.
Exactly what I expect from you. Here's the thing. The kind of object that hit on Saturday is a fragment of an asteroid. It is literally a space rock. And there are these shards of broken up asteroids all through interplanetary space. And every once in a while they hit the Earth. There are, I've got a number here. We get hit 25 million times per day by meteors.
Wow.
And so they don't all hit the ground. A lot of them are really small. We still end up getting 18 tons of meteorite making it to the ground per year. Those are all space rocks, chunks of asteroid. A meteor shower is a really different animal, though the name is related. There are all these comets circling the sun, and comets are collections of rock and gas and ice. And when they get heated by the sun, they start to kind of fizzle and break apart. And so along the orbit of any given comet that comes close to the sun, there's all this debris spread around, you know, just like trash that didn't get picked up after a football game. And once some of these comet orbits intersect Earth's. And so, for example, in August, we get hit by what are called the Perseid meteors, probably the most famous, and those are bits of debris left in the orbit of Comet Tempel-Tuttle. And so a meteor shower, almost by definition, only involves particles from a comet as opposed to fragments from an asteroid.
All right, there you go. A distinction and an important one. You know, when this entered the atmosphere, we know we had this boom, we know we had an explosion. How much of this, do we have a sense of how much of this particular meteor burned up? Are there fragments? Would they have hit the Earth? And if they did hit the Earth, do we know where?
Yes, we have there's been a new tool in the hunt for meteorites, especially, and that is aircraft and weather radar. It turns out that when these rocks fall from the sky, radar waves bounce off of them and we get a signal. And for this particular event, there were 4 different radars that picked up the falling pieces. And we have no idea how big those pieces are or how much they are, but we do know where they fell. And so they fell right in the middle of Cape Cod Bay. And so I've been told, I'm no oceanographer, but I'm told the water there, it's right in the middle of it. And that's where all of these radar signals converged. So that's why we have some specificity of where they actually fell. And, you know, people have said, oh, maybe you could take a magnet out and dredge up some of these. Well, it's in 100 feet of water and probably the pieces aren't very large. And importantly, we don't know what kind of meteorite it is. There are different flavors. Now, some, and the ones that are most interesting to look at are made almost completely of iron. I've got a little one right here. This is an iron meteorite.
All right, so folks, if you're watching on YouTube, we've got one in Kelly's hands here. It looks just like a black piece of coal to me.
Yeah, it's actually a piece of shrapnel. If you look at it carefully, it's a real angular thing.
Yeah.
And it certainly is attracted to a magnet, okay? That is what we call an iron or metal. Now, here's another meteorite. This looks like an everyday stone, and in fact, a lot of meteorites are probably lying around and you'd kick one and you'd never know it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't attract the magnet at all, even though it has tiny amounts of iron inside. So, dredge if you want, right? I make
also,
no guarantees.
Dredge at your own risk, because
You know,
there are certainly things in the water that are going to get attracted to that magnet.
Say, you're more likely to dredge up a revolver from, Prohibition era or something like that.
We're joined right now via Zoom and on the air by Kelly Beatty. He's a senior editor at Sky and Telescope magazine. We're talking about the meteor that exploded over the skies of Massachusetts this weekend. You pointed out how rare this kind of an occurrence is, Kelly. How about around here? Is there anything comparative to this in our history? I mean, how often does it happen here? You pointed out it barely ever happens around the world, so presumably very not often here.
Well, right. I'm not aware of any daylight bolides or fireballs in our immediate area in Boston, but I knew you were going to ask that question, Edgar, because you always do. There are 2 recorded meteorites that have fallen in Massachusetts that we know about.
Go on.
One fell in Northampton in 1963, and it is indeed a metal meteorite, like the one I just showed you here.
Okay.
And then one was found fairly recently, literally on a hillside underneath dead leaves and wild blueberry bushes in 2018, and there was quite a bit of it, quite a few pounds of it, and it is not a metal meteorite. It is a stony one, like that second one. And so, they come in these different flavors. There's even a old record that I've heard about a meteorite that fell in Lowell. And I live in Chelmsford, so this is pretty close. I have never been able to find anybody who can corroborate that. So we'll stick with the 2, now 3 known meteorite falls in Massachusetts.
One of the things, Kelly, that, just kind of in my day-to-day, obviously, like, folks were chitter-chattering about this all weekend in person online. And one of the things I noticed a lot of people sort of being somewhat disquieted by the fact that we did not know this was coming. It seems like we did not know this is coming. And is that a big deal? Should we be worried about that kind of thing?
So we didn't know it was coming because think about this. Think about a boulder a yard across at the distance of, say, the moon, okay?
Gotcha.
On its way to Earth. What is the chance? What kind of telescope or detector would you need to see something that big, that small, that small coming toward Earth? And in fact, there have been a handful of asteroids that have been detected in advance of hitting the Earth on collision courses with the Earth, and they did hit the Earth. But they all broke apart in the atmosphere. They were relatively small, maybe the size of a car. And objects that size tend not to really land intact. The ones that we really need to be concerned about, and which scientists and NASA are concerned about, are the ones that are, say, at least 300 or 400 yards across, the size of the size of Gillette Stadium, let's say.
Okay, that's bigger. Yeah, much bigger.
Yeah. Okay, that's much bigger. And so what happens is, again, I mentioned the amount of energy, the kinetic energy that these things land with is directly proportional to the amount of mass they have and to their velocity. So something that big hitting would be really devastating for whatever area it would be. If something the size of Gillette Stadium hit the State House or Gillette Stadium, it would be a bad day in New England all over. There would be not just the crater, and people think, oh, it creates a crater, but really, when these things hit the ground intact, it is like an explosion. It is like a nuclear bomb going on.
Yeah.
And so there's a blast wave and debris and all kinds of stuff that would affect a very wide area. And so that's the kind of object, this sort of, a few hundred yards and bigger are the ones that the detectors, the satellites and NASA and telescopes are concerned about, because those are the ones that really could do damage if they hit.
Gotcha. Kelly, before I let you go, I wonder if you get somewhat philosophical with us, which is to say, I mean, you're somebody who's always thinking about our place in the universe. You're thinking about that kind of stuff. When an event like this happens, like what's a takeaway? What's it an opportunity for us to think about?
Yeah, it's great, Edgar. For me, I mean, I deal with this stuff every day. So I don't want to say I'm blasé about it, but I sort of take it in stride. For everyday people who saw this thing for the first time, I've seen a lot of chatter about why didn't we know it was coming, and somebody should have told us, and it's probably fake or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice and timely way of getting people to go outside and look up. because we have kind of lost touch with the night sky, or daytime sky too, but the night sky in particular. And there's a lot of stuff going on out there. I'll tell you just in passing, if you look in the west after sunset, you'll see two really bright lights. Those are Venus, the brighter one, and Jupiter. And in just 9 days, on January 9th, they're going to be so close together in the sky, it'll look like some alien binary planet. You can cover them both with your thumb. They'll be that close together. And it's not a particularly rare thing, but it really is pretty. And astronomy doesn't have to be hard, Edgar. It can just be beautiful.
All right. We've been speaking with Kelly Beatty, senior editor at Sky and Telescope magazine. skyandtelescope.org if you want more. Kelly, thank you so much for being with us here on the Curiosity Desk.
Great, Edgar. Take care.
Coming up, we will look at one local startup's meteoric rise and why VC funding for startups like Whoops of the world matters. This is the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7 and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Ethan Hawke. He has spent decades shaping contemporary film, starring in Hollywood classics, redefining independent cinema, and directing projects praised for their insight and originality. He joins us on The Culture Show to talk about the roles that marked him, the stories that drive him, and his enduring creative partnerships. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Standish Village in Dorchester's Lower Mills, providing assisted living residents with programs designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. Learn more at standishvillage.com/programs. And Gloucester Stage, presenting Bad Books by Sharon Rothstein. Excitement erupts in a small town when a civil dispute becomes a raucous debate in the quietest of places, the library. Starts June 4th. gloucesterstage.com.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Well, a Boston fitness tech company just made history, and it has nothing to do with your step count. Whoop, the wearable health tracker born right here in Boston, was valued at $10 billion earlier this year after closing the largest venture capital deal of 2026 for a Massachusetts startup. But for every Whoop, there are a whole bunch of startups that never make it too far off the ground. So what does it actually take to go from a dream to a $10 billion valuation? And how has the tech startup ecosystem around these parts changed over the last 10 years? It's a big question, but here to help us unpack some of it are two people who know this world inside and out. Aaron Pressman is a tech business reporter for the Boston Globe, who's been covering Whoop's meteoric rise and the broader Massachusetts startup scene. And Jeffrey J. Busgang is a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School and co-founder and general partner at Flybridge Capital Partners, an early-stage venture capital firm. Aaron, Jeffrey, welcome to the Curiosity Desk.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, Jeffrey, I want to get into what it is to be an early-stage venture capital fund in a bit, but I'm going to start with you, Aaron, and talk a little bit specifically about Whoop and what's happened here with Whoop. I was just talking with Kelly Beatty about the meteor, and was saying, when it comes to outer space, there's lots of numbers that get thrown at you, but it's hard to put that in context. I sort of feel like, the tech startup world can be that way too. You've got these numbers, you've got these big dollar amounts, but it's hard to understand how big of a deal that really is. How big of a deal really is what's going on with Whoop right now?
Well, there are some other numbers that we can use to kind of get a better sense as
More
humans
numbers.
of like what Whoop is. So Whoop, it's the wristband that measures health and fitness, and it doesn't have any screen on it.
Yep.
And they say they have 2.5 million members. So that's a lot of people.
That is.
They said that their subscription revenue is like around $1 billion run rate, which means sort of going forward about $1 billion a year. So that's sort of a small, medium-ish tech business. Even
Okay.
in Boston, a lot of our other businesses, a company like Wayfair, HubSpot has a lot more revenue than that. But really, powerful and growing business.
Okay, so I guess the question I would ask is this: like, one of the things I'm trying to get my head around is whether, sort of in a vacuum, this valuation of Whoop and talk of them sort of advancing to IPO, whether that in a vacuum is a big deal, or whether here in Massachusetts, here in the Boston area in particular, it's a big deal because of the context of the times, which is to say, you just pointed out some companies. I think if you look back 10, 12, 15 years ago, it felt like there was a lot of this going on. So is this as big of a deal as it is in part because it's not happening as much as it used to?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, Whoop is an exciting company, and it would be cool when they go public, but we have not had a tech IPO, a pure sort of tech company going public in Massachusetts for several years. And even several years ago, it was kind of slowed from the pace we used to have back in the day. So Boston could use an infusion of this kind of excitement and money into the tech world. I think it's interesting. Whoop is in a really tough business. I think, we all remember some of these old things. Before Fitbit, there was Jawbone.
Yeah.
There was the Nike Fuel Band. This is a tough business. So Whoop is trying to do something interesting to become a big public company and maybe get into like a little bigger business than just that wristband.
Can I add something to what
please
Aaron,
jump right on in.
Yeah, Aaron just said something really important. It's really rare for an IPO in Boston, but it's also super rare for a B2C brand, for a consumer brand that everybody knows about.
And what is B2C for those who don't know?
Business to consumer. So
Okay.
a consumer brand like Netflix or Shopify, which are two of the most successful subscription-based consumer companies that are well known to everybody in the world, that are big public companies. Whoop aspires to be more like Spotify or Netflix. That's really rare in Boston. What we're known for in the Boston tech ecosystem is either biotech.
Yeah.
So all the great biotech companies like Moderna, the makers of the vaccines for COVID-19, or business-to-business software. Companies like HubSpot or Klaviyo, which are the software packages that power businesses. So Whoop is special not just because it's a potential mega IPO. Those aren't very common in Boston.
Yeah.
But it's extra special because it's a mega IPO that's a consumer brand that everybody in the country hopefully will soon know about.
Maybe you can both weigh in on this next question then, which is to say, why? Why is it that Massachusetts does not have a lot of big tech IPOs? And why is it that Massachusetts has more business to business than it has business to consumer? Is that a historic artifact? Is it something about the nature of the ecosystem here? Like, what's the reason for that?
I'd say it's partly the nature of the ecosystem here. We have all these great universities, Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, many others. And so we focus on a lot of kinds of technology problems and software problems that are a little, maybe the nerdier stuff. Whereas people out in California, it's a little more freewheeling, a little more risk-taking, a little more, kind of fun. So I think most of the consumer brands have not happened in Boston.
It's one of the reasons Whoop is such a fun story, because Whoop is solving really hard problems. It's an AI company in one sense, but it's not OpenAI or Anthropic. It's
Right.
an AI company for health. It's a semiconductor company in some senses. It's a hardware company, but it's not NVIDIA. It's doing it specifically for tracking sleep and health and fitness. So it's a neat story in many ways because it's a hard problem company, which is what Boston is known for, but
Yeah.
a hard problem company targeted at consumers.
This is the Curiosity Desk. We're talking with the Globe's Aaron Pressman and Harvard Business School's Jeffrey Busgang about startup funding, how the industry has evolved over time. Well, Jeffrey, as I said at the beginning, I want to talk to you about like early stage, or I think people hear these terms. I think we generally have a sense of what they are. We're like IPO, they're going to IPO. I kind of get that, but there's a whole sort of world of stuff that happens, which is your world, right? In the lead up to that, I wonder if you could just quickly give us a real primer on it, and what are the things that a company like Whoop has done already that has got them to the place where they're at, where it's looking ahead at maybe having an IPO.
So I'll just take Whoop to continue the example because
Sure.
it makes it tangible for listeners. So
Great.
Will Ahmed was a Harvard College squash player, and he was really into fitness and really into performance. And so he thought a band would be helpful for other professional athletes and other aspiring amateur athletes. But of course, he's not going to IPO as a college kid with no employees, no revenue, no product. So he raises what's called a seed financing, as he has the seed of the idea and he needs a little bit of money to get going.
And who is he getting that money from? That seed funding. Where does one go for seed funding?
So there are sets of firms at each stage of the financing process. So my firm, Flybridge, is a seed stage firm. We specialize in seed financing. After companies raise seed financing, build the product, get some initial revenue, they go for the next stage of financing, which is known as the Series A. Now you might wonder, why is there something before the A?
Right.
That's a historical artifact. When I started in the tech ecosystem 30 years ago, Series A was the first financing.
Right.
But what happened was founders who were just even earlier than the Series A standard financing were able to find people like me and my firm Flybridge who were willing to take a risk pre-product, pre-launch, just with the idea.
Is that the analogy here? Like if I'm a sport, if it's a sports analogy, being sort of, well, the thing is, you draft a player when they're in college, and then somebody goes, actually, if we get somebody and draft them out of high school, maybe we get in there a little bit quicker and a little bit earlier. Is that kind of sort of it?
It's a great analogy. Think of the seed as middle school.
Okay. Okay.
Series A is high school.
Gotcha.
And then go along with the letters, Series
Yeah.
B, Series C, Series D, college, pro, and so forth. So
Some of these basketball academies, I think, are
Yes,
drafting kids out
literally.
of middle school.
I think that is probably exactly true. So where is the, when we think about, when we talk about Boston, there being at sort of a startup economy here, a lot of businesses kind of starting up. Are they all in various sort of stages in this like seed A, B, C, and also is there where does it usually come off the rails? Where's the hard part to like make the jump?
Well, honestly, like where it comes off the rails for Boston is kids come out of these colleges with great universities, great ideas, and then they go to California or they go to New York. So where it comes off the rails for Boston is we have failed sometimes to make clear to all these people with great ideas that there's support for them here, that there's investors for them here, there's office space and talent to work with here. So some things are going on in the state now this year to try and really get the attention of those kids before they leave. Cursor, the AI company in San Francisco to make code, is for MIT kids.
How about from your perspective?
Aaron's totally right. There's a history from Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, Harvard graduate, goes out west. Dropbox, Drew Houston, MIT graduate, goes out west. Cursor, as Aaron mentioned. There is a history of us losing our talent. So as a community, we're trying to get better at seed and even pre-seed financing, which is like elementary school. That's a whole nother conversation.
Pretty soon, when folks are expecting a child, we're going to be like, I think that child's going to be pretty strong. I might want to make a bet here.
Term sheets at the hospital.
Yeah.
So there's this movement here in Boston where we're all trying to get better at funding folks right out of Harvard, MIT. This is the moment when they're graduating. Here as we sit, 1 mile away, Harvard, 2-3 miles away, MIT. And as they're graduating, getting them funding and then trying to convince them to stay here. But as Aaron says, it's really hard because there's the siren call of California and there's the siren call of New York City.
What about Texas? Is Texas a siren call now? I mean, this is one of the, I think you did some reporting about the fact that, like, Massachusetts kind of for a long time been sort of number 3 when it comes to venture capital money. And now Texas, which is poaching people from California as well, seems to be on the rise. Is that changing the equation?
Well, so far, the rise of Texas has not drawn from Massachusetts. It really is kind of in a competition with California, especially to be more pro-business, whatever that means, than California. And some, for political reasons, I think some large tech companies moved there, and that has drawn a lot of money there. I'm interested in Jeff's opinion. I mean, is it a competition with Massachusetts for Texas, or is that sort of like an alternate universe?
I totally agree with Aaron. By the way, Aaron and I grew up together. Little known
really?
secret. Yes, we were both from Lexington. We're both graduates of Lexington High School.
No kidding.
Yes. So
amazing.
I hate agreeing with him as much as I am, honestly. And
okay.
Yet,
well, we'll find something to get you to disagree about. Don't worry.
He's absolutely right. Texas, we don't think of as competition. It's
really?
Not where hard problems get solved. It doesn't have the same university system. Our best and brightest are not fleeing to Texas. It's really bleeding from California.
But that, as you sort of point out, that's like a long-term problem, right? This is kind of always been happening, this sort of exodus for a place like California. And yet, as you pointed out, like, the Whoop story is in part getting so much coverage because we haven't had a company get to this stage in a while. How, like, what is happening in the world of Boston startups broadly? Like, there's been a slowdown, it sounds like. But if, we always did okay, it seems, because it's a big part of our economy, even with attrition to California. So what's happening now that's different, if anything?
Well, Jeff and I were just talking about how the rise of AI is making it easier than ever. If you have some idea, you want to make an app or a program or something, you can use AI and start it up. So Massachusetts, some of the businesses and some of the, Maura Healey and other people are trying to make sure that the people with AI ideas stay here. So there's this big effort. It's called the Massachusetts AI Coalition. Whoop kind of started it. Maybe organized it to provide space and money and networking opportunities for these new AI companies. So I feel like right now we maybe are at an positive inflection point where we're working harder to keep those companies here.
The other thing I would say, and you touched on this, there's this huge attrition curve from C to A to B and so on. And one of the things that happens in Massachusetts is arguably we're not ambitious enough. That
in what way?
If we find an exit, if a big company wants to buy one of our portfolio companies or another venture capital firm's portfolio companies, founders in Massachusetts are often very quick to sell, and investors may not invest in ambitious enough projects. There is a belief here in our ecosystem that we need to raise the bar in our ambition. We need to solve harder problems, more complex problems. And that's why you see so much energy around clean tech and climate, around AI, around the intersection of IT, AI, and healthcare. These are big, big problems, ambitious problems that we're trying to really rally the ecosystem to focus on.
Is that difficult? I mean, like, what's standing in the way of that larger ambition? Is it the historic notion that, there was a behemoth out in California and therefore, hey, everybody can make a lot of money by starting an idea and then selling out to a bigger company early in the process? Or did it used to be different? Did we used to see more companies taking it to the finish line around here?
It's a little bit culture, for sure. And it's a culture both with investors and with founders. But I'll tell you what's sort of funny about our culture. If you go to New York, there's no shortage of ambition because if someone makes $10 million or $50 million, they're a piker in New York City. And in California, we're now seeing trillion-dollar companies. We have 3 companies that are about to IPO for greater than $1 trillion. So the idea that we're here celebrating a $10 billion company is beautiful. It's amazing. No one else in the world is productive as our little tiny ecosystem. We punch way above our weight. But when you compare what's happening on the West Coast, it's daunting.
Wow. Yikes. What is an IPO? Again, like just sort of thinking about, what makes the IPO stage such a big deal, such a celebrated thing, something that, like a draft, people are like sort of talking about when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Why?
I think one thing is that it's when a company becomes public and then is every quarter is announcing its results and it's having its stock on the stock market and it's, could be mentioned on the 6 o'clock news. Your stock went up today. You're suddenly much more visible, much more investable to anyone who wants on their, in their Schwab account or their Fidelity account to go out and invest in Whoop. They can do it. So I think from at least one point of view, it becomes much more a public company and much more visible. And that can really boost a brand, like a consumer brand like Whoop probably.
Yeah.
I think the other thing you get is transparency and clarity. When an entrepreneur promotes their results, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that, you don't really know. Right. But in a public market, in a quarterly filing, when you're announcing your earnings, it's all in black and white. And so you can really see what's going on. That's why there's so much excitement right now about the SpaceX IPO, about the Anthropic IPO, about the OpenAI IPO. Those are companies we've been all talking about for a decade.
Yeah.
And now we're going to really see what's real.
Get to see under the hood. This is the Curiosity Desk. We're talking with the Globe's Aaron Pressman and Harvard Business School's Jeffrey Busgang about startup funding, Whoop, how the industry has evolved over time here. I wonder, for folks who maybe are not in the tech world, not in the biotech world, not wealthy enough that they're really thinking about investing in anything, but live and work around here. I mean, what would you say to them in terms of, why this matters at all? Like, why it matters at all, even if you're not paying close attention to this, what does it mean for Boston? What does it mean for Massachusetts? why should anybody care about this stuff besides the people who are standing to make sometimes millions and millions and millions or more dollars off of it?
Well, I think the economy in Massachusetts really flows out of some of these innovations that we have. There are core industries here: finance, healthcare, education. All of them are strong, but where does that growth come from? Where does the next big thing come from? Whoop, as part of this latest financing, also announced they were going to double the size of their workforce from 800 people. A lot of those jobs are going to be right here in Kenmore Square in Boston under the big Whoop sign next to the Citgo sign.
Which is being moved.
The Citgo sign is being moved so that it's a little higher than the Whoop sign, I think.
I love that. That's such a little detail that's kind of great.
But so, that's 800 new jobs that this money is bringing in. And when you multiply that times many, many more startups, and especially if we finally got, as Jeff says, a big ambitious startup, that would mean a lot for the economy here.
How about from your perspective, Jeff?
Yeah, the thing that's different, though, today in the age of AI, and I write about this in my book, The Experimentation Machine, is that value and company creation is being disconnected from job creation. Because in the age of AI, you can use the AI to do the work and the tasks of humans. And so creating 800 jobs sounds amazing, but it's not that many jobs in the context of the Massachusetts economy. And if you look at all the big tech companies, they're all emphasizing growth in revenue, growth in business functions, scope, scale, but not growth in jobs. In fact, many are reducing the number of jobs, the number of humans. So there is a lot of power in having Boston tech ecosystem be successful, but it's coming in a moment where we should just acknowledge that we're in a very disorienting place in disconnecting labor and work and jobs from success in companies.
So with that disconnect, with the lack of being able to point to sort of, job creation and say, here's a reason why it's good for the area, here's a reason why it's good for you person who is not in the tech industry, what does that do for the case of why people ought to care, why it's potentially good for Massachusetts, good for Boston?
Well, we want success. We are a city of winners. We love winning. And so having our companies be winning companies, that's just great. And it's great for value creation. All those individuals who are stock owners of companies like Whoop, like HubSpot, like Wayfair, they're out spending money, buying homes, doing amazing things in the community. That's great for our ecosystem. If the opposite were to be the case, if we didn't have a vibrant tech ecosystem, we would look like Detroit. I mean, we would be full of these industries talking about yesteryear and our manufacturing base that's all now gone.
The other thing is that these companies do bring us things that all of us could enjoy. If we solve problems with batteries and make ways to reduce climate emissions in all the different parts of our economy and our lives, that's definitely going to benefit everyone in Boston, everyone on the planet. And the companies around Boston are the ones that are taking on those harder issues in energy and pollution and batteries. So, fingers crossed, there could also be drugs and life sciences. Fingers crossed, there could, drugs. Yeah. There could be some big breakthroughs that would really improve everyone's life.
All right. Well, there you have it. We've been speaking with Globe reporter Aaron Pressman. By the way, check out his write-up in the Globe's annual Tech Power Plays list. That's out next week. And HBS senior lecturer Jeffrey Busgang. Jeff, Aaron, thank you both for being with us on the Curiosity Desk. Really appreciate it.
So fun.
Thank you.
Up next, all this talk about Whoop and wearables. When you've got access to all this personal data, can gamifying health actually build better habits? We'll get into it. This is the Curiosity Desk. Don't go anywhere.
Across Africa, U.S. funding of HIV/AIDS programs is being changed dramatically. And in Mozambique, doctors are battling the disease alongside big infrastructure challenges, like access to electricity and water.
Water and power are still struggling in the country. It's still a huge problem.
I'm Juana Summers, the fragile state of Mozambique's AIDS treatment, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Innuendo in Natick, presenting Hunter Douglas Duet Architella PowerView shades for your home and office. Hunter Douglas PowerView automation, measured and installed by their technicians at Innuendo and innuendo.com. And the Lyric Stage, presenting Something Rotten, a side-splitting mashup of 16th century Shakespeare and 21st century musical theater, now through June 7th at Lyric Stage Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com.
You're listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News. Well, from step counters, calorie counters, sleep trackers, heart rate monitors, yes, in 2026, it is easier than ever to get personalized data on pretty much anything that is happening inside of your body. The question: can having that much data really make you healthier? Take the sleep score, for example. If you're not familiar, that's data point users of certain wearable devices get ranking their night's sleep. Now, given that the CDC estimates about a third of Americans get below the recommended amount of sleep per night, maybe a sleep score is just the right incentive to perfect the way you sleep. Or it could also turn you into an orthosomniac. This is an emerging term for sleep obsessive folks who are so preoccupied with their score that they're actually getting worse sleep. So here in studio, we are now joined by Tony Cunningham. He's director of the Center for Sleep and Cognition at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Tony, welcome to the Curiosity Desk. Great to have you here.
It is great to be here.
Let's talk about sleep. I mean, people are, it seems to me, quite obsessed with sleep right now. Is that accurate, or are we in a time where people are really into sleep?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I like to say is sleep has kind of had its moment, and it's much more the whole "I can sleep when I'm dead" type of mindset is starting to kind of go wayside, which I'm a big fan of. Like, I do think that we were not prioritizing sleep enough. And so now, as pendulums do, it is starting to swing in the other direction, and we're starting to maybe see some people that are getting, when they come see me, I have to help them bring the temperature down a little bit about their concerns about their sleep. Yeah.
Let's talk about baseline. I mean, let's set a baseline here, which is to say, as you point out, like you didn't say. I'm going to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like the idea of that notion of "I'll sleep when I'm dead," in your estimation, is not a good one. We should care about sleep. We should get a healthy amount of sleep. So what's baseline good sleep? What should we be knowing?
So the tough thing here is that it does vary by individual. So there is no, really blanket response to that question. Now, I get from the kind of public messaging, public health standpoint, the messaging of shoot for 8 hours per night it's a great message.
Good average.
Yeah, it's a good average. But there are people that need a little bit more than that, and there are some people that need less than that. The problem when I start going around and saying that is then everyone starts thinking they're one of the less than people, and so you got to be really careful with that message. But it is true that some people don't need quite that much sleep every night.
All right, so let's talk about this world of wearables and all of the data that's available to us. I mean, presumably, some of this you look at and you say, "This is good. It's good to know this stuff." What's some of the good stuff that is kind of worth knowing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things it does is, again, it just makes people mindful of their sleep. It encourages them to prioritize sleep when they can. Maybe put down the phone and stop the doom scrolling a little bit sooner. There's a lot of good things that come out of the wearables. And again, it's being aware of what they are good at measuring and what they're not so good at measuring. And I think that is the message that needs to get out a little bit more.
So let's get that message out. Let's parse it a little bit, which is to say, like, what are they measuring? And, one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and we try to do on the show, is, we are, we're in a time where we are swimming with data.
Yeah.
I mean, we are swimming with data. But I think with that comes an increasing, difficulty being able to separate signal from noise and knowing which of that data is meaningful on its face and which is meaningful for the thing we want it to be meaningful for. So when it comes to sleep stuff, what in this is signal and what is noise?
Yeah, so just a little quick historical perspective. There were these devices that have been around for a lot longer called actigraphy watches, and they were the medical grade version of what the sleep wearables are today. And they were great because they estimated your sleep based on movement and light exposure. So those were the kind of two things that you got through that, and you were able to get a decent snapshot of when people were asleep versus awake from them. That company that was producing them was a medical grade company. In this new flood of wearables, they decided it was no longer profitable to make those research grade devices. So now we're all, including the research, including the clinical field, are all searching for what is kind of the best device, or how can you use these devices to replace that gap in the field. And so, what these devices, the really great thing about those actigraphy watches is you could pop the hood and see how the car was put together. You could toggle like, oh, I want it to be this sensitive to movement, or I want it to like measure this level of light exposure. And you could precisely see what was being measured. And the downside of the current era is it's all proprietary information. It's all industry secrets as to how they are scoring your sleep and what measures are going into it.
Oh, interesting.
And so us in the research field and in the clinical field, we have to take these devices and then we have to put them up against our gold standard sleep measurement and kind of see how they do and kind of compare and contrast like what is measuring well and what it's not doing particularly well.
This is Curiosity Desk. We're talking with professor and clinical psychologist Tony Cunningham about sleep and wearables and gamifying sleep. To the best of your understanding, what are they measuring?
So what they do still movement, like that's a big one. Like get the step counter, and still getting that aspect. I don't know of any that are taking light exposure, but they are able to get a lot more signals that these old devices didn't get. Things like heart rate, skin conductance, heart rate variability, temperature. All of these things can be taken, and here's what they do well. Let me just kind of cut to the chase and tell you what they do decently well. Is they do a decent job, just like the old watches, of telling you when you're asleep and when you're awake.
Okay.
So they do give you a pretty good snapshot of like, how long it took you to fall asleep, how much you were awake throughout the course of the night, and then, your total sleep time. Where they are still in development, and I don't want to be like a big poo-pooer because I do think that like, with all of technology and all of AI development, I think these things are only going to get better over time, but they're taking all of those other measures that correlate, that are associated with different sleep stages, and then they try to say that, okay, this is close enough to enough information to tell us that they're in this stage of sleep as opposed to this stage of sleep.
As a researcher, do you look at something like that and say, absolutely no way, we can't really quite do that? Would you do that in a paper?
It's a not yet. It is a firm, very solid, sound not yet. Again, I don't know where they go in the future, and I could see a future, especially with like an additional little dongle or something that can support it, because what we do in the gold standard sleep studies, we bring people in and we put electrodes, we put some on their scalp and we put some next to their eyes and a couple maybe on their chin at a bare minimum. And from that, we get a combination of signals of your brain activity and your muscle tone and your eye movement. And we're able to imperfect, like even the gold standard is not perfect, but we are able to get a decent, the best look that we know how to do of the different sleep stages that you're in throughout the course of the night. And what is inherently missing in all of these wearables is the brain signal.
Activity.
Like that is the number one thing we use to score sleep. And so
that's clear. You can see in the brain signal, exactly what stage of sleep somebody is in.
It is
pretty
as clear
much
as we have. Yes. Yeah, it is the best that we have today. And here's the thing, I think there's going to be improvements in that in the next 10 years. Like all of this thing is kind of an evolving technology. My concern that I see these days are people that are getting like kind of overly stressed about this, sleep score that I don't know. Like they don't tell you exactly what goes into it. And then they may update the sensors, they may update their software, and then you have to do it all over again, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not sure what they toggled, what they changed between each of these updates.
Let's talk about orthosomnia, which it must be said, this is not a clinical term. This is just a term people are sort of starting to use to basically describe, I'm obsessed with my sleep score. Is that right?
That's right.
How big of a problem, I mean, as somebody who's in the field, is this really an emerging problem, or is this just like, I don't know, some people just get obsessive about things?
I'd say emerging is the right word. It is not something that like we're going around and rigging 5-alarm fires or anything like that. Like, for the most part, I think when you talk about the aggregate of, again, I like that people are paying attention to their sleep and trying to prioritize sleep when they can. So, I think talking about greater good, that's the bigger pull. But there is a real concern. And again, going back to those people that may not, and again, small, maybe about 15% of the population don't need quite 8 hours of sleep. And those are the primary people I see come in my clinic, is the people that, they are very stressed, very anxious, that they cannot get 8 hours of sleep every single night. And so I work with them and to kind of help, again, bring down the temperature so that they can kind of embrace the fact that they are just built a little differently in that way.
So, as somebody who knows from this, like, are there some simple things people could do to optimize sleep, even without any wearable at all? Is there just some like baseline? Here's a good way to sort of know that you're optimizing your sleep as best as you can.
The number one way is just how do you feel?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I got two small
kids. That's so squishy. I want a better answer.
I know. I have two small kids, and I could tell you I know when I'm not feeling great and when I'm doing well. That said, there is plenty of research out there that people like are pretty bad at estimating. I mean, between peak performance and slightly declined performance, they're pretty bad at it. So, it really is a lot of the sleep hygiene, standard sleep hygiene advice, which is you want to keep your bedroom cool, dark and quiet. White noise is okay. You want it to be as comfortable as possible. But the really big thing is you want your bedroom to be a source of rest and not a source of stress.
Yeah.
And so if you find yourself laying there staring at the ceiling, stressing about your sleep or that you're not getting enough sleep, our recommendation is just to get up, get out of bed, do something different.
Do that somewhere else.
Go do something else until you feel sleepy. And there's a difference between sleepy and tired. I'm tired all the time with two small kids, but I could not lay down and fall asleep.
Right.
And so what you want to do is really be mindful of that sleepiness, that sleep pressure that is kind of driving you to fall asleep. And then the other biggest thing, one more thing I'll say is consistency. The more you can be consistent with your sleep schedule, you're going to fall asleep faster and have higher quality sleep.
All right, I'm going to go take a nap. We've been speaking with Tony Cunningham, director of the Center for Sleep and Cognition at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Thanks for joining us on the Curiosity
It's been a pleasure.
Desk. Well, that just about does it for us for now. The Curiosity Desk is produced by Aidan Connolly, Rachel Armani, Olivia Corcio, Hannah Loss, and Nicole Garcia. Patty Daniels and Jamie Bologna help us sleep at night. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. We had special help today from Bill Piacitelli. Maddie Geyer ran our live stream. Thanks to Andrew Massawa. We will be right back here tomorrow on GBH 89.7. That's in 23 short hours. And we'll be streaming on YouTube. If you can't wait that long, we've got a podcast version of the show you can check out. Till next time, I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the University of Rhode Island's College of Business. URI's online Blue MBA blends ocean science, business strategy, and real-world impact. Learn more at uri.edu/BlueMBA. The Italian trio Il Volo return with a breathtaking concert filmed in Sicily's ancient Temple of Concordia. Their upcoming tour stops in Boston, and we've got tickets. Tune in for Il Volo in the Valley of the Temples tonight at 7:30 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. Coming up on the show, Ethan Hawke. He's one of the most singular actors working today. He's balanced Hollywood hits, independent films, and work behind the camera as a writer, director, and producer. He joined us ahead of his trip to Brookline to receive the Coolidge Award. Then a true crime story pulled from Boston's own art world. Security expert Anthony Amore joins us to uncover the myriad twists behind the Rembrandt heist. How did one man outwit the system, and what drives the world's most audacious art thieves? And baker and author Dory Greenspan. The 5 times James Beard Award winner is known for turning baking into an art of everyday pleasure. That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. We're kicking things off with actor, writer, and director Ethan Hawke. I caught up with him ahead of an event at the Coolidge Corner Theater, where he received the 2025 Coolidge Award. Ethan Hawke, welcome back to The Culture Show, and congratulations on the Coolidge Award.
Thank you. I feel honored and privileged, and I have a bounce in my step. I feel like I'm somebody.
Well, of course you're somebody, but
we're all somebody.
This has been a moment for you to look at your career. I'm sure take stock of all that you've done, especially as other people are doing it for you, as we'll talk about. How do you look at this moment and this point in your career and what you've accomplished?
Well, I don't know. It's been particularly interesting having Robert Redford pass and having Tom Stoppard pass. Those are two men